work to do.
I'm happy that you're not counting the days. So there. I think somebody called me yesterday and said they saw this was whoops. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm delighted to see everyone here. Good morning. Welcome to meeting number 11 of the Economic and Community Development Committee. I want to wish everyone a happy new year and a happy new decade. Welcome to the members of committee and to visiting members. I see no visiting members at the moment, but I do expect some to be coming in on matters a little bit later. And to those who are here in attendance and to the members of the public and to the media, you can follow us, follow the agenda and debate on your computer, your laptop, your tablets and smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. The Economic Development Committee acknowledges that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis people, We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 of the Mississauga of the Credit. And so, as we are about to begin a new year for this committee and a new decade as we move forward as a city and our citizens, I want to begin, as I normally do at the beginning of each year, in terms of making a statement from the chair. Again, welcome to the first meeting of the Economic and Community Development Committee of the new year and the new decade. With this momentous new beginning, we have the opportunity to look back at 2019 and, in fact, to look forward in terms of what to come in 2020. I would like to begin by recognizing our amazing, talented division heads and their talented team for the work that they have done in the past year and the work that they are going to embark on as we move forward. There are too many to name them all, so I think you know who you are, and your friends know who you are, and so on, and we know who you are. So I want to thank you, and your thoughtful reports and expertise are invaluable, and I thank you for your dedication and your hard work that you have done to really help this committee. I also want to thank Juliana Carboni, who is the Deputy City Manager responsible for Community and Social Services, for your unmatched leadership on the many divisions that are under the ECDC umbrella that you're responsible for. And I know that, as I said to you this morning, are you counting the days? And you said, no, Mr. Chair, there's so much more to be done, not counting the days, because we know that you are going to be retiring in style and moving on to other opportunities, but you've left this organization in such a good space, and your leadership has just been unparalleled and tremendous. So thank you very much for your leadership. I also want to thank our committee secretary, Carol Gusnitz, and our team of clerks and your team of clerks who have worked really hard in terms of ensuring that our meetings and the documents that are posted online are quite easily accessible and easy to read and view by the public, because it's extremely important that they understand and know what's actually going on. So thank you so much for and your team for doing that. And of course, I want to thank the outstanding members of this committee and of course the visiting members as well. Councillor Fletcher, you're often here, and so on. I know Councillor Carroll is on her way in, but I want to thank the members for their collaboration, passion, and commitment on the many items that we have overseen over the last year, and items that we are going to be seeing coming forward in 2020. As we progress through the year and term, it's actually very important for us to continue to set a clear objective as a committee in terms of how we achieve our objectives and our goal on behalf of the citizens of Toronto. It's equally important that we take stock of our accomplishments to both celebrate our victories and relate our achievements to the residents of Toronto. After all, we are in fact accountable to them. This public forum is a great setting to provide this kind of an update. I'm in fact incredibly proud of the work we have done through this committee in 2019. Some of the highlights include the launch of economic development and the cultural equity plan that advances diversity and inclusion in all EDC activities across the city, the development of a permanent funding model to achieve better, safer homes for Toronto community housing tenants, the appointment of the Night Economy Ambassador, and the creation of the designated internal working group focused on strengthening the economic impact the nighttime events, and achieved investment of $25 per capita for arts and cultural initiatives. We've trained 9,000 city staff on confronting anti-Black racism in order to improve organizational and cultural service efficiency. And I want to recognize, I saw her earlier in the room, Anania Grant. I don't know if she's, oh, there she is. Would you please stand? Because I want to acknowledge you and the great work you and your team have done. It's really great work. It's very difficult work. It's a challenge. Racism is alive and well in all sectors in our society, and we're working really hard to stamp it out and confronting it to ensure that we can all advance and be better people and be a better city and get better results, better opportunities, and so on. Because when we amputate those who are members who should be contributing, when you amputate their spirit and they don't get a chance to contribute, it's a problem. And when you have systemic issues and systematic systems in our environment that holds people back and that creates challenges for them, we don't get the best of the best. We don't actually achieve our goals and objective to be a just, equitable, and a real diverse society. So I think we all have to look at ourselves often and ask ourselves, are we doing the right thing? Are we respecting one another and so on? And this work that Anania and her group is actually doing is really helpful for us here in the City of Toronto, and I'm hoping that that will transform other organizations within the context of what we're doing, and so it's extremely important. And we've seen an increase in the city funding to homelessness and housing. I heard an applause there. Certainly, if you wish to applaud, by all means. Why not? I'll join you. Thank you. An increase in the city funding to the homelessness and housing first solution of $33.3 million. The creation of the new senior services and long-term care division to provide coordinated services to Toronto's growing seniors population. The rollout of an improved marketing strategy for museum and heritage service programs. The creation of Toronto's first ever community benefits agreement to create quality jobs, a child care center, and community space as part of the developing Casino Woodbine in Councillor Ford's area there. And Councillor Ford, thank you for your work on that file as well. We've led successful missions to Los Angeles, Europe, New York, London, and China. And those missions are designed to strengthen our relationships with our international partners and also help us to finalize lucrative foreign direct investment opportunities for our city. We facilitated $515 million in investment that resulted in 4.2 million square feet of new industrial and commercial office space. The expansion of the Fair Pass, a TTC discount program, to low-income adults receiving child care subsidies. We provide a continuum of response, intervention, and prevention services to complex community violence issues through social development finance-based programs and pilots. The enhancement of community grants through our integrated online grant management system. The creation of the new Indigenous-led grant and capacity building for community boards, including services to match Black Torontonians with leadership roles. We work with landlords and tenants to improve energy efficiency, water conservation, and waste diversion at 105 apartment towers in the city, saving an estimated $4.4 million in utility costs and conserving 2,362 Olympic-sized swimming pool worth of water, and that's a lot of water. We established Toronto's first home share program to match students seeking affordable housing with seniors who have spare rooms in their homes. Overall, the first year under this new expanded portfolio, we have accomplished many amazing things. At the start of the term, I call on everyone in this room to come together to work for the citizens of Toronto and we have done just that, and there's more to be done. But our work is not done at the beginning of 2020. As we begin 2020, we have a whole new list of priorities to build on the work we have already completed. In this new year, we will be working towards the implementation of the 5-year action plan for the Downtown East to coordinate city services and address long-term community needs and challenges. We will be expanding community-based anti-violent initiatives, including TO Ward Peace and the development of a community safety and well-being plan for Toronto. We will be delivering the city's youth service review to better guide investments towards the highest impact youth programs. Additionally, we will be moving forward in the planning process for the FIFA 2026 World Cup bid and continue on in the planning process for the new Museum of Toronto. We will also be implementing the next phase of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Action Plan, including by training 71% of the city staff, Toronto Community Housing, the TTC, and the Toronto Police Services. We will be providing community development services in 31 neighborhood improvement areas, in 7 revitalization areas, and 8 emerging neighborhoods, with a report back on the review of the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy. I also want to add that we have seen in 2019 80,000 new jobs. Torontonians who are looking for jobs, 80,000 of them have actually found jobs, and that's an amazing result for us here in the city. With all of this and more in the works for 2020, I'm very confident that we will continue to provide the best and most innovative services to the residents of Toronto while working together to overcome any challenges we may face. Thank you all once again for your commitment and dedication. Now, let's get working on 2020. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So, moving along with the agenda, are there any declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of the December 4th, 2019 minutes. Vice Chair Grimes, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried. We have some speakers, and I think we have a couple of items, Madam Speaker, of notes that folks have sent in. One communication, okay. That's good. So we have some communication, at least one piece of communication that the clerk will distribute. Thank you. All right, so members, we will run through the agenda now. The first item on the agenda is EC 11.1, Stronger Together at the University of Toronto. This is a presentation. I will hold that. The next item is EC 11.2, Non-Competitive Contract with Integrated Canada Limited and Quatro Group Software System, Inc. for the continued provision of proprietary Toronto Fire Service information and technology system. Councillor Cressy is moving the item. All those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. The next item is EC 11.3, Neighbourhood Food Hub Model at 1470 Gerrard Street East. It's an update. I will hold that. We have speakers. The next item is EC 11.4, Investment, Employment and Training as part of the Regent Park Social Development Plan. Again, we have speakers on that item. I will hold that. The next item is EC 11.5, Community Engagement Process for Locating New Shelters and Related Services. We have a speaker on that particular item, and we also have a presentation. Okay. EC 11.6, Business Improvement Areas BIA's 2020 Operating Budget, Report Number 2. Councillor Cressy is moving the item. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. EC 11.7, Fall 2019 Mission to Europe. What's you? Councillor Carroll is moving the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. EC 11.8, New York City's Mayor's Mission 2019. Okay, Councillor Lai is moving the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Where the report's going to council? No, it's just received here. Did you want it to go to council? Oh, the film board. Okay, so then we could, yeah. So we can basically move to send it to the film board.
Can we just hold that down? And
I'll just hold it for now, and then we'll figure out the motion that. Okay.
So that's number 8. You need to.
Sorry.
8.
Council Fletcher. So we'll just hold that down. Okay. Did you have some, Councillor Carroll? Was there something else on this one?
Oh, no, I was just waiting for you to get to number 9.
Yeah. Okay.
Number 9.
Reopen. That's right. Yeah. So just on the number 8, I'd like to just ask that we reopen number 8 so that we can hold it and we can deal with it. Okay, Councillor Carroll? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so that's reopened and I'll hold it in my name. Okay, Councillor Carroll, we are now at EC 11.9. Would you like to hold that? Or?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Just one quick question.
No worries. Okay. Morning, Councillor Wong Tam. Good to see you. Happy New Year. Welcome. Thank you. All right, so we're now going to the top of the agenda, and the item here is the Strong Toronto, the University of Toronto, and we have a number of presenters, I believe. We have Mr. Scott Maubrey and Andrew Thompson. Those are the two people I have here. It seems that there are more. I don't have your name. It's just, what? Sorry? Could you put your mic on for me?
Christine Burke.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much. I didn't have your name here. Thank you. You may begin. And welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. We very much appreciate the opportunity to be here today at your invitation. I'm Andrew Thompson. I'm the Chief of Government Relations for the University of Toronto. And we're joined by Professor Scott Mayberry, who's the Vice President of Operations and Real Estate, as well as by Christine Burke, who is the Head of Campus and Facilities Planning for the university. This morning we wanted to provide an update on 3 things that we've been working on that we believe are of interest to this committee in particular. First is a brief update on just the overall status of the university and its efforts to maintain and gain ground globally. Second of all, an overview of how our newly released $4.5 billion capital plan will help create some of the critical infrastructure that we think aligns nicely with the city's priorities. And then finally, just a quick overview of some of the areas of particular economic development interest that we see as real opportunities for the city going forward. So with that, I would just turn this over to Professor Mayberry and let him proceed.
Great. Good morning. I'm going to show some slides, and the opening one is very much a spectacular image of our place in Toronto. You'll see there our heritage, that is the University College building, one of the first that's been recently renovated. You also see medicine and engineering, plus our green space, looking down upon the great city that is Toronto. I would ask if you have any questions during our presentation, please give them. We'll have hopefully time at the end, but myself or Christine as the university's chief planner will help us answer those. So, strong city, strong university. University of Toronto benefits from being in this city, and it contributes, we believe, to the dynamism and overall attractiveness of this city that is now competing for one of the greatest places to live and work and be on the globe. U of T is a top 10 public university in the world. Top 10. We're top 30 if you count all universities, including Harvard and all the big privates in the United States who have, very significant resources. But our global reach, our impact, our ability to influence opportunity on a global scale is very much something that we value and that we believe contributes to the overall opportunity in this city. Thomson Reuters has indicated that University of Toronto is the most innovative university in Canada. We have had more than 500 startups over the past 10 years, just the last 10 years, that have raised $1.4 billion in support. Our creative destruction lab, that's part of the Rotman School, that's recently been exported across Canada and down into the United States, has hosted 500 science firms, startups, that have raised $4.4 billion in investment thus far in equity capital. U of T is also the top university in North America, the top university in North America for employability. That's one of those ones that surprised us a little bit. It's not something we participate in. An external rating agency talks to the world's employers and say, who do you want to hire? And U of T is tops of that list. So some numbers. You see there's a bunch of the obvious things. We started in 1827. We're coming up on our bicentennial very shortly. We have 22,000 employees. That's more than the auto sector, primary auto sector. So we are a big player. We set the standard for top employers in Toronto. We are the top diversity employer. We're the top family-friendly employer. We're also the greenest employer. We have an annual operating budget of 2.7. That'll be almost $3 billion this next year, about a quarter of the city's. We are one of the largest landowners in downtown Toronto. We have 120 buildings on about 130 acres on the St. George campus, which is about 13 million square feet of space. There are 37 buildings on 303 acres of about 2 million square feet of space at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. A quarter of our students have study, work, and research abroad experiences. We have 90,000 students. A quarter of them spend time outside of this country. Students are studying here from 166 countries. We have 600,000 alumni who currently live in 190 countries in the world. We are an engine of social mobility in the Greater Toronto Area. 1/2 of all of UT students, and it's more than 60% at the University of Toronto Scarborough, have OSAP funding. This is directed at those most needing financial assistance. We have the most generous per-student aid program in the entire province, beyond OSAP, and in fact, in 1996, our governing council passed a resolution, a formal requirement that the University of Toronto will admit and support through their graduation, first entry students, irrespective of their ability to pay. The only university who had that kind of funding commitment before us was Harvard. Our students also give back. Our Boundless campaign recently was put to bed at the end of 2019 with $2.641 billion from 99 countries, 100,000 donors. 68% of those were our alumni. It also tells you something. Usually that's a higher number for a university. 31% don't have any connection to us at all that are contributing to us. So they see that. So supporting the city's priorities. We have, as Andrew mentioned, a capital plan investments over the next decade or so of $4.5 billion. It's about 10 million gross square feet of space, roughly a quarter residential, half academic, and about a quarter innovation spaces. Partnerships with industry and startups, housing. We often talk about students, but we have added faculty and staff. We're in the talent business. We need to recruit and retain the world's best. You don't compete on the global stage like we do without having the world's best. As you will appreciate, the residential side of the equation at recruiting and retaining is now an issue, and we're working very diligently on that. Healthy communities. We take very seriously our role in that first picture of the big green space that is our King's College Circle. Public realm, open space is a very critical element of our campuses and leading to healthy communities. Sustainability, we'll talk a little bit more about our environmental footprint. We have some commitments going forward that I think align with city commitments and are, frankly, some of these are unique in the university sector. On the innovation and talent side, you will have seen this picture back in April or so in the Globe and Mail, full-page ads here in the New York Times because we had global reach on this. Our Schwartz-Reisman Innovation Center started with an idea. The current buildings on those locations, the Banting and Best buildings, are demolition ready. They were abandoned by the Faculty of Medicine because they would no longer support medical research. They sat empty for 3 or 4 years. We started offering them to our student startups. And within a couple of years, they were completely full with student startups using space that frankly nobody else wanted to create companies, create jobs. That idea had us hire one of the best architects group in the world, Weissman Freddy out of New York, because they have done innovation spaces. They created a schematic design that we released last August with the idea that this would help Toronto anchor discoveries that happen at the University of Toronto in AI, Jeff Hinton working out neural networks, and Tilla McCullough discovering stem cells. That the cornerstone of, frankly, the 21st century economy will include AI and stem cells. This building is to deliver on the growth of those technologies in the Toronto region, and that is what particularly excited Jerry and Heather to give us $100 million, the largest contribution ever for the innovation sector in Canada, to build this building. 750,000 square feet of space. Phase 1 is the one on the left. We have started construction on this. Demolition of the existing building is starting actually this week. That will come up, we will occupy in 2022, and that's primarily AI. The larger building on the right will be a laboratory building, and it's more stem cells, regenerative medicine, bioscience, those kinds of things that will happen in there. Overall, we believe this will be a key element of not only University of Toronto's role in the global economy, but Toronto, Ontario, and frankly, Canada's role. Across the street in the Mars Tower, which we're an equity holder in, we hosted 4 years ago and recruited JLabs, Johnson & Johnson's global startup support system. We have 53 health-related startup companies in that JLab space, in U of T space. We signed space licenses with these folks. That includes Blue Rock Therapeutics and Deep Genome AI. Startup companies are going to make Toronto famous.
Famous, sir.
Student, faculty, staff, sorry?
More famous.
More famous. Fair enough. Of course, the residential side is very important. U of T is helping to address housing issues that you, I know, are all working on to solve. We expect to build between 2,500 and 3,500 units of affordable housing, attainable affordable housing at the University of Toronto for faculty, staff, and students. The picture there is the University of Toronto Scarborough passive residence that we will be opening tenders on February 11th for. We hope to be in construction this summer. That will be the largest passive building in North America. It will house 747 students, deeply needed student residential housing on the UTSC campus. On St. George, we're building the Spadina Sussex residence with 518 students. And we recently just released an image of a graduate house expansion on Harvard that Alex Bojakovic, the architect critic in the Globe and Mail, said on his blog, historically, the University of Toronto is the best patron of architecture in the country, and this example here shows that they are really stepping up their game. Healthy communities. We take this also very, very seriously. The St. George campus, the overall capital projects are integrated into a university's secondary plan that Christine has ably been leading. It positions U of T to contribute to the next 100 years of Toronto's success. It balances our historical core. This is in district. We have a historical district. We have other areas that will, where growth will be concentrated. That historical core is the largest concentrations of heritage buildings in the whole country. We have 80 on the St. George campus. We take particular pride in our curation of those. We, of course, do need to expand for academic and collaborative reasons, collaboration with the broader community, as well as with the business community. And I should have mentioned the Schwartz Reisman Center, one design element that we wanted, because frankly, if you look back at many university buildings, they turn their back on the city. This building opens its arms to the city and welcomes folks coming by. We want them to come into this building. We want them to be part of that future. I will also say UTSC has a secondary plan as well, and I want to point out one of the best partnerships ever in Canada, and that is the P5 project, not suffice to just a lowly P3. University of Toronto, the city, the province, and the feds in a partnership, a for-profit corporation, the Toronto Pan Am Aquatic Sports Center that U of T and the city jointly own, that is a fabulous success. Financially, you can talk to your city manager who along with me, takes particular note of those things. We've had 12,000 children last year participate in activities beyond the university and community use, 12,000 children in that building. It is a wildly successful effort. Continuing along the healthy communities, the public realm, a project we are really excited about is our landmark project. That is retrieving from being held hostage by the car, since effectively 1905 is our King's College Circle, our quad, if you will, the heart and soul of the University of Toronto, that we are removing cars from that landscape. We're going to put some of them underground. We are going to prioritize, as you can see in the picture, our faculty, staff, students, and community members, the pedestrians, so that they can engage with the landscape and, frankly, for the first time in 100 years, have the appropriate relationship with all those heritage buildings that sit around that circle. This project will also deliver the largest geo-exchange, also known as geothermal project, in urban Canada ever. We are drilling 381 800-foot holes in King's College Circle, and we will save 15,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year with that project. There is an Indigenous garden that when you come in from Queen's Park underneath the rain, on the right will be a very large Indigenous garden that will be a very effective representation of Indigenous culture, and the Indigenous contributions to life in Toronto will be a key component of that. Sustainability. We're doing a geo-exchange project to help us meet our commitment to reduce by 37% below 1990 levels our carbon emissions across the 3 campuses. We are going to do that 37% commitment by 2030 to 74,000 tons from 114 now, while almost doubling the amount of built space we have on campus. So it is a really difficult challenge. 25% of that is the geo-exchange project. We will also, on that part of that student residence we're building at Sussex Spadina, Robert Street Field, something we work with Joe back in his time of being our counselor. We're putting a geo-exchange project on that location as well that will not only feed the student residents, but it will give us the opportunity to explore a district energy system for our Huron-Sussex neighborhood that has community members and also university buildings. That's something that is a high priority for us. We are partners. Your mayor, our president speak very much about the opportunity of working together and moving forward together. There is no question the University of Toronto benefits from being in this city, in this region, in this country. We feel that we can contribute very mightily to growth together. And in fact, that's recognized by KPMG that looked at and used the City of Toronto as a model, and in fact calling it the Toronto model. We have brought, for instance, jointly, and this helps, the Vector Institute, the AI Institute for Artificial Intelligence is a particularly good example. We've partnered with public sources and private sources to make Toronto and Canada particularly a global leader. They have brought in $80 million from 30 companies, including Google, Shopify, RBC, and Magna, $50 million from Ontario, $50 million from the federal government. There are 400 researchers, including 34 faculty members from around the world, located in Vector, in U of T space in the Mars building. They'll be moving into the Schwartz-Reisman Innovation Center when we open. The concentration of expertise and talent has helped convince international firms, this is just at the University of Toronto, but more broadly, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, Thomson Reuters, Huawei, Fujitsu, Johnson & Johnson, GE Healthcare, Bayer, Versant Ventures to expand in Canada. There are 25,000 jobs related to AI are anticipated in Canada, and Toronto has created, as the chair said, 80,000. Strong future, new clusters. This is where we are focusing. We are working to do in other sectors what we did with Vector to provide the foundation Canada needs to lead in the most transformational new economy clusters of the future. That includes clean tech, which will be driven by our carbon action plan, because we are partnering with our faculty members who are generating technologies, and in fact, we've invested $1 million in a faculty member and student out of engineering technology that's competing in the X Prize in Alberta, a $2 million X Prize or a $10 million X Prize. We purchased that technology. We're going to install it on campus for capturing carbon and turning it into raw feedstocks. There are 72 startup companies created in the last 5 years around clean tech. We have a healthcare medicine by design. In fact, an example is Prime, Precision Medicine Initiative. This comes out of Shana Kelly from our faculty of pharmacy. It collaborates with faculty of medicine folks, engineering, arts and science. It's all about precision diagnostics, biologics and protein engineering, nanomedicine and biomaterials. U of T and our partner hospitals file a patent every 3 days. Thank you. We think we have a beautiful future together. Happy to entertain questions.
Thank you very much. And we have questions for you. And we love this arrangement because it's fantastic. So, visiting members first. Are there any visiting members of the committee who wishes to ask a question? Okay, Councillor Wong Tam.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the passion behind the presentation. Just curious in terms of the funding source. Is all the projected capital investments and new dollars going onto the campus, has all that funding been secured?
No. Anything in motion now, when we have to get approval from our governing body, it all has to be identified. On average, about 30% comes from philanthropy. Typically, debt will be no more than 20% per project. And of course, we have to identify sources to pay that debt. And the rest of it would come from either university sources and in the past, some government sources as well, either provincial or federal.
And with respect to the ambitions of the university, and I love the fact that there's so much on the table, what are the top priority components that will move ahead over the next, for example, 2 to 5 years? What's happening first?
Well, the Schwartz-Reisman Innovation Center is and then residential housing, and we have on all 3 campuses academic buildings that in each specific area are important. On the St. George campus is the data sciences building that we're working on. At UTM, they're building effectively a science building. They have not built one in decades. And at UTSC, they need another instructional center. That's one of their priorities. There are Indigenous building projects on all 3 campuses as well.
The move to remove cars from King's Circle is one that I find of interest, especially since I don't see a lot of vehicular movement, although they're usually stationary. They're parked around the circle. So is the intention to just repurpose that space? Are you expanding the green space to meet the edge of the building? Or is it just to turn over that sort of road space that's currently occupied by surface parking for pedestrian activity?
So within the campus, the front campus, as well as Harthouse Green, we do need to maintain for service vehicles and accessible routes, and also for facilities drop-off. But primarily, we'll be turning it over to students, faculty, staff, and visitors of the campus. So essentially, you won't see cars apart from maybe 2 or 3 stationed for accessibility reasons, and then just the day-to-day routine operations. So it will turn significantly. There will be more open space, but there needs to be some hard surface for those activities.
If I can just add to that, one of the things that people will notice is it will be a disruptive project in that there will be a large excavation of the main circle done, and that's to accommodate the geothermal project that will need to be located there. So this is, we don't want to leave the sense that it will be, you know,
We're
just
not
a
snapping
nice
our fingers.
greening of it. I mean, this will be a disruptive project which will change some of the, you know, the photo-worthy parts for convocation.
And does that mean that the curb edges of the sidewalk and the roadway, are you losing those? Is it becoming more of a one-nerf?
Exactly. So granite paving in certain parts of the project, and then the remainder concrete paving, but essentially a Woonorf with, you know, necklace gardens, more greening, about 200 additional trees on the overall campus, as well as some of those areas that are, you know, you'd consider just road right now. It allows for essentially 3 rows or aisles of cars. We'll turn over to plazas and places to sit and so on. So much more, hopefully we'll see a lot more people enjoying the space.
And then finally, with respect to the innovation hub that you're I guess recreating, because you already have one, but looks like you're going out to rebrand it. It seems to me you're ready to scale up. How does that interface with the City of Toronto, in particular the corporation here? How can we do a better job of supporting the work that you're doing?
Well, on a couple of things. One, help us get that building built. Things are a little slow with getting approvals. I mean, you know, it's obvious, but frankly, we recognize that, you know, as somebody said, there's more cranes in Toronto right now than in the largest 6 cities in the United States. That means everybody's really, really busy. We, of course, are partnering also with Mars down in the Waterford Innovation Center. I didn't mention that. We feel that innovation and innovation spaces are well underbuilt in Toronto. So Toronto needs to do more. We're well behind Boston. We think that this Schwartz-Reisman Innovation Center, like the Mars building, which is 99.8% full, we turn people away on a daily basis from Mars. We do need more innovation space because there are more startups coming. There are more innovation companies who want to do primary work here, and they need space to do it. And they want to be in downtown.
Yeah, so you want a
Thank
faster
you.
permit process?
5 minutes, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I would just wanted to add one thing is just that the Phase 1 application is coming through, it came through Community Council just this week, and so it will be coming to Council this cycle.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other visiting councillor? Seeing none. Councillor Carroll, question?
Thank you. Yeah, I was interested. We have an enthusiast who comes to all of our budget deputations and frets about the amount of money we invest in tech. And we had a conversation the other day when we launched about AI. He was concerned about AI taking over expenditures in government and indeed the whole mush sector and killing jobs, but you framed it as a job creator. 25,000 jobs, is that primarily going to happen in the health sector? Where will that happen?
So we've just done, Councillor, we've just undertaken an economic impact survey of the AI cluster, and what we've found for Toronto is actually, and indeed Canada, quite remarkable. 5 years ago, there were roughly 300 AI firms in the country. We are now at over 670.
Wow.
Those are 40% clustered here in Toronto in the GTA. There are now 50,000 people who work in AI in Canada. That's an addition of 25,000. So these are this is a sector that is gaining rapidly in terms of what it's producing in terms of actual economic benefit to our communities. The secondary areas of benefit, though, will be, as you've indicated, in things like autonomous health, our ability to have better diagnostics, to have more precision medicine undertaken, and we expect to be able to utilize the health cluster that's so strongly represented here in Toronto as part of that. So we believe, and what the research is showing is that we are now past the tipping point of disruption where the AI sector should actually be increasing jobs rather than disrupting them.
Okay.
Shelley, I do want to also add that Gillian Hadfield, who heads up, is the director of the Initial Institute in the Schwartz-Reisman. As Heather Reisman said, this institute will lead with humanity, and as Gillian said in the Toronto Star last week, Canada stands poised to be the source of the creativity and innovation in producing AI that is safe and beneficial for us all. In AI too, the world needs more Canada. We are absolutely, deliberately trying to understand how AI can land in the appropriate way.
Okay, that is great to hear. So the big question that we have, aside from economic development, are the housing issues. It's Spadina Sussex, you're adding district energy. I'm wondering, is that looked at in any other site? Like the Scarborough U of T campus was the possibility?
Both UTM and UTSC both have geothermal projects. In fact, they've had geothermal projects before us. We are now examining them like other landowners in the city. Whenever we build a building, putting geothermal underneath. We have shifted our thinking in that, and this carbon action plan looks at them in deep detail wherever possible.
Okay. And then the other thing is, it's great to hear that you know, a quarter of this 10-year planning, it will go to be spent on housing creation. The question is, are you looking at the type of housing in the context of the problem that we have? I mean, we would love for you to have more housing because it solves our rooming house problem. But are we looking at creating the kind of housing that actually attracts the student to say, yeah, I'm going to stay on campus? That's the kind of housing. So we're sort of looking at what made them leave the campus to go looking for the illegitimate type of housing, what draws them back. Is that going into the design and planning?
Yes. So we have 92,000 students actually, and we have 6,000 units of housing. So part of the wedge is just lack of the ability to host them on campus. In fact, we discouraged upper year students because we have a first year residency guarantee. So adding 3,000 or so more units of housing is to address that across all three campuses.
Right.
But the addition with laneway houses, we have 40 or so we can do in the Huron-Sussex neighborhood, some faculty housing even in the student residence, plus some tower kind of development at multiple locations, because we're a significant landowner in downtown Toronto. We have building sites for residential. Will also be for faculty and staff. We will address the students, but we also have to address the reality that faculty and staff need to be in reasonable distance of work to be able to attract it here. And if we hire from Europe to come to work at the University of Toronto, they want to live in Toronto. They don't want to have to commute out from the suburbs, and they certainly don't want to drive.
I would also just say, Councillor, we very much appreciate the work that this council has undertaken on the housing file and the most recent debate in council around the housing policy. Recognition of student housing as social housing is tremendously important.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Thanks.
Question? Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, everybody. It's good to see you again. A couple questions around citywide and how the city relates to the university. So I know last term we signed an MOU formally between the city and the U of T. I know the president, President Gertler, speaks from time to time with our mayor and occasionally in a forum with other university presidents. So separate from the local councillor and planning and approvals and all the stuff we did together, where does the relationship currently sit on a citywide level between the university and the city on all the areas you've articulated where there's cross benefit, and how can that be improved?
So as you know, we love our local councillors. They are an important part of our...
I don't believe that for a second.
Say that again. You say that again, please. Just want to hear you.
Yes, absolutely, Councillor Thompson. No, we do very much love our local councillors in Scarborough and here in the St. George neighbourhood. There is a bit of a debate going on about how the university should work together within with the city, and whether that should be done on a more collaborative basis with the four universities coming together along with the four major colleges to really think about how the city building works. But obviously we each have very different roles to play, partly because of location, partly because of size. So we are currently working that through. The city manager has proposed a different approach, which is perhaps more of a sector-wide approach than the one that we were previously working on. But again, the focus is more on issues of not just physical presence, not just the education mission, but what we can do jointly to contribute to city building.
Yeah, and I guess that's where, whether it's from a policy side with research and innovation, whether it's from a city building side related to housing, whether it's sustainable design, all these pieces. I've long struggled with how do we maximize the cross-benefit between institutions as opposed to, a landowner who we're going to approve or not approve a planning application. How do we establish that cross-beneficial relationship between institutions in the city? I'm delighted to hear that the city manager has some thoughts. I'm curious at an early stage, at a sectoral approach, whether between university and college institutions in the city, whether you have any thoughts on where we can improve, just to help inform our thinking going forward, not for action today.
I guess the one piece that I would emphasize outside of the formal protocols that are in place for us working together is that there are tremendous resources on the campus that can help inform the city's decision-making. Later this week, the Dean of Social Work will be meeting with the mayor to discuss solutions to gun violence.
Today, I think my dad's in the meeting with him.
So this is a good example. I mean, we've reached out in the past to work with public health here on questions around the opioid issue. There are these resources there. I mean, it's obvious in some ways to come to the university to talk about institutional finance and governance or talk about transportation issues. But the actual work around city building is, of course, much broader. And I do think we need to just regularly canvass both the city and our faculty to make sure we understand what the depth and breadth of those opportunities are.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. Councillor Lai, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation, by the way. Just on page 5 about your innovation center, I just wanted to have an idea where is this innovation center is going to be situated?
It's on College Street, directly across from Mars.
Across
the
from Mars.
northeast quadrant of College and University.
So it's the north side of college?
Yes.
Okay. Great building, by the way, but
Isn't it beautiful?
yeah, it's really nice. And on page 6, about the UTSC student residence,
Yes.
I mean, very, very great idea because I know there's a shortage of student housing in the area
It is critical.
as a Scarborough counselor and also as a proud parent of a UTSC alumni. And I really think that is really big time that we need to improve the housing there. So when is this housing facility going to be completed? Do you have an idea or?
It's probably 2.5 years of construction. We hopefully start this summer.
It's already been in the process of approval or plan?
It's been approved by us. We're out to market. We open the tenders on February 11th.
Okay. And
I.e. the construction tenders on February 11th.
I see. So within about 3 years' time, it's going to be there. Good. I heard that, I don't remember how much land you have in UTSC?
It's almost 300 acres.
300 acres.
Now, a lot of that is down in the valley. That's part of the conservation area, but there's significant land area. You know,
Developable.
The Pan Am Sports Center, we spent collectively $32 million removing the former the dump that was there and cleaning all that out. There are now significant lands north of Military Trail in that area of campus. That's where the campus will grow.
Do you actually have a master plan of the land that you're going to be?
Yes. Yes.
You do? Because
UTSC has its own secondary plan, master plan.
yeah, because it's very important now that I think we're expanding. I mean, it's not just about downtown Toronto. Yes. I think it's very important that we actually have some focus in the other area because, just so that we can have more space there. Other than the instructional center that you are going to be planning to build, what other plans do you have in the UTSC campus?
There are two that I wanted to highlight that are in process now. One is to actually introduce a new Academy of Medicine.
A new
Academy of Medicine.
Academy of Medicine.
Which will help bolster, we believe, the health outcomes in the Scarborough area as well as the Durham region. This has been in discussion now. We're in discussion with the province about this project moving forward. It would be our 5th Academy of Medicine attached to the University of Toronto and is a fairly important project in that regard. The second piece is to take advantage of of course, we have Mars downtown. What we're talking about creating is Earth in Scarborough, which would focus more on environment and related technologies. A major area to help, we believe, bring about new thinking around vertical farming, food production and other issues like that. So this is there is a fairly ambitious plan being put together by our new principal at UTSC, Wisdom Teddy. We're happy to brief you on it.
In addition, currently under planning is also an arts and cultural building.
Oh.
And that's pretty exciting for UTSC, as well as Scott mentioned an Indigenous house, which is a small but unique pavilion-sized building that would be very visible as you come from, I think it's Centennial.
Yeah.
And that's, we've just hired an architect Formline, working with Levitt Goodman, and that would be a fantastic project that everyone's really excited about at the campus.
Amazing. I look forward to the Earth concept for the UTSC area. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lai. Councillor Grimes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned we're top 10 in the world, one of the top 10 universities. Well, how is that measured? And where are we? We're number 5, 6, 4, 3?
We're top 10 publics in the world. We're number, depending on which ranking, and we don't pay particular attention to any one rankings, but the fact that all of the 5 major rankings all put us top 30 in the world for all universities. So we're number 21
how's that
in
measured?
some, number 27 in others. It's based on our impact. So they'll measure research output, publication citations, how many times they're cited. It will measure industrial funding and collaboration. It'll measure student programs, how international you are, your ability to attract talent from around the world. It will look at student satisfaction, depending on which ones there are.
That's a pretty complicated formula.
They're all a little different. We are confident in our rankings because we land there everywhere. We're always ahead of everybody else in Canada. But frankly, we're out competing in the top 50 in the world. We have the least funding per student than any of the other 49 by a lot. So we're doing it with wits and strategy.
Well, great. The geothermal energy system, how many holes did you say were drilled in for that?
We are drilling, I have the precise number, 375 on King's College and 152 on Robert Street. They're 800 feet deep.
So the King's College one, I don't know if you can answer this, like what's the payback? I mean, besides taking the carbon
Depends on what the federal carbon tax will be, but between 11 and 14-year payback
11
on
to 14.
the capital cost.
Great, sounds like
It'll save us at least right now $1.5 million a year in utility cost.
wow. Great, those are my questions, Mr. Chairman.
The other piece is I just point to the picture. If you look on the far right-hand side, you'll see a lovely concrete smokestack. That is the largest carbon dioxide emitter in downtown Toronto.
Wow.
By putting in this project, it will no longer be such.
Wow, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grimes. Just one question for me. There's a parcel of land to the north of the Pan Am Centre.
Yes?
It's owned by the city.
Yes?
I'm just wondering, any plan?
Yes?
But we can talk about that later,
Yes.
I'm sure. It is.
Yes, we're interested.
Yes, okay,
Yes,
fair
we
enough.
signaled that interest. Yes, we think we could do wonderful things.
Fair enough. That's great. Looking forward to that discussion. Thank you. Speakers. Speakers, visiting members to speak. Seeing none. To committee, Councillor Carroll to speak. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, yes. I asked the question I asked about housing. Are we looking at what type of housing? Because I think that's the key. It's the experience. We've had it at Seneca and you have it at Scarborough U of T. It's great to say we're going to build X number of beds, but I asked that question because I hope that we're evaluating the Campus One experience, evaluating what's going on in Montreal and York and places like that, because you can't, as you know, you can't just build the conventional dorm housing. The student is different. Some enter later, stay longer, they're in and out at different times of their life, and so the housing they need is different. And if we're not addressing that as we build, we're not going to solve our problem of them seeking housing in less than ideal circumstances all the way to illegitimate circumstances. And so I asked that question because I just hope that's, with everyone that is built, we then go on to continually study its use and who it's serving and whether it's successfully serving, so that we don't have, okay, we build a type of housing that everyone moves into in September, and by Thanksgiving, they've met someone, found a circumstance that actually fits their lifestyle, so they're out of their heads, and the churn keeps happening, and we deal with it in the neighborhood. That's the thing I think that is going to make the partnership ideal. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Cressy to speak.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for inviting the university to present, and thank you to the university for presenting to Christine, Andrew, and Scott. I don't see you guys as much anymore now that I'm no longer the St. George councillor, but it's always a pleasure.
But they still love you, Councillor Cressy.
We got along very well, but I'm not easy at times. Listen, I think, and Scott, you said it off the top, that when we have a strong city, it helps to empower a strong university, and very much the reverse is the case, that when we have a strong university, it helps to fuel and empower a strong city. And I think their presentation spoke really well to it on a policy side, whether it's research and innovation around AI or cities or sustainability, whether it's as a driver of talent and bringing a talent pool here of not just bringing students and faculty and jobs to the city, but also bringing leaders to the city. And I think as a landowner, and a significant one of that, and I think it's very much true, especially in the last 10 years, that the university is practicing what it preaches as a landowner when it comes to sustainable design, to architecture, to heritage, and to increasingly building really livable buildings, and buildings for faculty and students together. I have a personal relationship with the university, as we all do, both as the former counselor for St. George campus, and also on a personal level because there's an award named the Cressy Award at the University of Toronto for outstanding local community leadership. And so it's a deep personal relationship. I think where I'm interested at a citywide level going forward, and I referred to it in my questions, is how do we, with institutions in the academic sphere, just like with institutions in the health sphere, how do we better align our shared objectives so that it's not on an ad hoc basis where you happen to have a really enterprising dean or the director of cities, the interim director at the Cities Institute, or a local councillor, where they together come up with something great? How do we institutionalize that whereby on an ongoing basis the university is fueling the city's growth and vice versa? And I think that's the nut to crack on a go-forward basis. And I know we have an MOU, we've had lots of reports, we have occasional teams and tables. This very presentation here today is part of that, but I think that's the next big step on a citywide basis with a university like the U of T that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. Councillor Lai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank you for doing the presentation, and it's very, very amazing, and it's amazing concept and all that. And I just wanted to add to Councillor Carroll's comment about giving some different innovation to the planning, not just the type of housing that we have. I think amenities is very important, especially at the UTSC campus. And the questions I was asking was whether you have a secondary plan on that one. And I think we should be very visionary and apply some innovation into that plan in order just to make it maybe a small university community in there, because it's kind of out of nowhere in that area because the students wanted the lifestyle and all that. And I think it's very important that we throw something like to be like a mini community in there that will enhance the lifestyle of all the students and to make Toronto, Cedar Toronto even more better, great. And also, I do think that thank you. I mean, I wish you luck on the funding. It's not easy to get so much funding to get things going. But I just wanted to give you some tips on. You do have a lot of international students in UTSC. As a Scarborough councillor, I'm very focused on the Scarborough portion of the campus, and you might want to tap into some of those alumni that have deep pockets to make sure that you have more funding and then speed up some of these planning that you have on the UTSC campus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Law. Any further speakers? Seeing none, I will speak. Thank you very much for being here this morning. It is an important process for us to listen and to hear and to learn from the institutions that are collaborating in terms of making this city a better place, first of all, for all of us, and then to shine globally in order to create that attraction and so on. In 2010, when I took over the role as chair of this committee, it dawned on me that we really didn't know you. You didn't know us. Not dissimilar to many other organizations in the city, and although we were and are the City of Toronto, we didn't understand the institutions and the roles that they play and the services, in fact, that they could offer us. We embarked on a program to reach out. That program continues today. We have a person who is responsible for the educational sector in our EDC department as a result of this requirement. We put together our international program where we collaborated with the University of Toronto, York University, McMaster, Sheridan, and all the other schools to welcome students here. We have benefited from so much research from just the focus on the University of Toronto now, but other institutions, Ryerson and others. We use that on a daily basis and so on. The Economic Development Department rely on you and your students and the research. The MOUs that we have signed and the alignment that Councillor Cressy asked about, it's actually really strong, but clearly we can make it stronger and much more universal and wide scale. Our relationship with respect to the Pan Am Centre, we hit a number of roads, bumps in the roads, and a variety of things, but it is working really well. I met and talked with Brenda Patterson, who was a board member on Saturday, and she was a deputy city manager here, and she espouses the amazing collaboration and the work that's actually being done. I just have to pick up the phone to call your president and to say, we have a initiative that we'd like to engage with you, and in fact, I did that 2 months ago. We're looking at bringing in a world-renowned cultural expert to Toronto. When I met with him in Paris, what did he say to me? I'd like to come to Toronto, and I'd like to speak at the University of Toronto. I'd like to get together there. I'd like to really bring together the students and the cultural community and so on. We picked up the phone. We made the call. Your president was very receptive. The process is in the works right now. My staff member, along with EDC, University of Toronto, we're working on that. It really then speaks to the fact that we are quite aligned and the relationship is extremely strong. As I said, when we started in 2010, we didn't have that. Today, when we travel, both the mayor, myself, and other members of council, we talk about University of Toronto because we meet a lot of your alumni globally, and they talk fondly about their times here. I was in China 2 months ago. There's a young man that I met with his father, the building hospital with a Canadian company, and we were there with other companies. What did his father say to me? His father said to me, my son had a great time in your city at the University of Toronto. I want to make sure that we continue to create and forge that relationship. So much that you do with respect to the training and the teaching and the learning that takes place continues to help us even well into the future and beyond. Because that young man that I met, his son will also go to the University of Toronto because that's what he said that he wants to have happen because of how he's been received at the university. But importantly, how they've been received in our great city of Toronto. So it's really important for us to ensure that we develop that pathway of how we work together, how we fast track the applications, the processes that are needed so that we can get on with doing things as opposed to talking about it or theoretically talking about how we need to put programs or a policy in place to make sure it happens. Let's just get it done because we know it has to be done and so on. So I'm really delighted at the relationship. I'm really delighted that you're here today to give us the update and you're talking about across the city. And I realize Mississauga is a piece as well because you've got the Mississauga Erindale campus. And I've been there, I've spoken there. We were actually working with one of your professors there with economic development about financial literacy. So there's a lot of work that continues to happen. It's just two big organizations trying to work together. And there's not enough time in the course of the day, but I know that our DCM and our management team, city manager, the mayor, and everyone is in copacetic. It's copacetic with respect to how we align together. And I'm very happy that we're moving forward. So with that, I want to receive the presentation, and our door is always open, as we know your door is open, in order to make our city a better place for a great institution. And I don't need the sort of rankings to tell me who you are and where you rank. I just need the people who have actually been through your institution and what they continue to contribute in terms of how you've benefited their lives and we've benefited as a result of our relationship in the City of Toronto. So thank you very much for...
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. So moving receipt of that, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much. Members, I'm just going to ask for your indulgence. I need to make a change in the agenda, just the order. I'd like to move item EC 11.5 up as a next item of business, and then we will actually go through the other ones. No, Councillor, a matter has just come up where I have to deal with this, Councillor Fletcher. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. But you're not a member of committee, Councillor, so we've just done that. Okay, so we are going to be moving now to community engagement process for locating new shelter and related services. So you have a presentation from staff, and then we have speakers. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you to members of the committee and visiting councillors for giving us the opportunity to make this presentation today. We wanted to give you an update on the homeless serving system, what the current context is, how has the city responded over the last number of years. As we said, there's been a number of changes. A new way of engaging around shelter and homelessness services, and then thinking towards the future about what some of the longer-term solutions might be. So the key driver of homelessness in Toronto is centred around the economy and the housing market. The increased costs of rental housing over the last 10 years exacerbated by the low vacancy rate, which is right now at 1%, and the lack of new rental housing has made it incredibly difficult for people to find and maintain housing that they can afford. We further have the complication of a large number of newcomers arriving in Toronto and needing shelter while they acclimatise to the new community and find their own housing. And we also have an increase of issues with mental health and addiction, which makes housing stability difficult for a number of people. But the City of Toronto has responded in a very commendable way. Over the last 5 years, we have expanded the capacity of our shelter system significantly in order to respond to the demand. We've increased the emergency shelter system by 76%. Increasing from 4,300 beds to 7,500 beds in just 4 years. We've also added new low-barrier services in the form of 24-hour respite services and 24-hour women's drop-in services. And in addition to that, focusing on the time of year when people's health and safety is most at risk, we've created a significant winter response that is activated each November and continues until April. This year we took a different approach and looking at who is experiencing homelessness, we tailored the services quite specifically in order to get better outcomes for people. We created new emergency temporary shelter programs, shelter beds, respites, and refugee services. So the overall cost of delivering homelessness and housing solutions has doubled, from $108 million to $375 million. Toronto's share of this cost has increased at an even faster rate. So at $158 million, the city's investment is now 134% larger than it was in 2015. The share covered by the provincial and federal governments has also grown during that period of time at 92%. But given our larger share, the city is now covering 37% of the total cost. We are now covering 42% of the total cost. And our new capital investment to expand the shelter system at $178 million is shouldered solely by the City of Toronto. When we look across the country and to measure how Toronto is responding compared to some of the other municipalities that are facing similar issues to Toronto, you can see that Toronto has a significantly larger response than any other community in the country, and in fact, in North America. And these numbers do not include the additional services we have in the form of 24-hour respite services. But it's hard to compare what might be happening in Calgary and Edmonton and Montreal with what's happening in Toronto. So if we look a little closer to home, you can see how Toronto's shelter system has grown in the last few years as compared to some of our regional partners. When we did our last street needs assessment, we found that 22% of non-refugee shelter users had moved to Toronto in the last 2 years. And of that 22%, over half of them had come from other communities in Ontario and were using our system of shelter. We've talked about the rapid expansion of shelters in the last few years, and this was spearheaded by a new project to create 1,000 new shelter beds in 3 years. We're in the second year of that project, as well as finding 400 replacement beds for the George Street revitalization. And we are well on our way to achieving those goals. But what that has done is required us to open probably 15 buildings in 3 years, when we usually open 1 to 2 every 10 years. It significantly changed the expectation and the requirement, and it was very clear that we needed a new process for siting shelters in order for us to be successful in achieving the goal that Council had set for us. So a new shelter siting process was developed. It was developed through an outside consultant who did a large amount of work talking to all of the stakeholders about what was involved in opening a new shelter. And we moved to a more property development approach, where it's a corporate-wide responsibility to search for buildings, to renovate those buildings, and open new services. We now partner with real estate services, information and technology, facilities management, corporate security, city planning, city building, all towards making sure that we find excellent locations. The division brings forward an annual infrastructure plan to Council and a budget every year for Council approval. Based on those two documents, the Deputy City Manager then has the delegated authority to move forward and approve a new location for shelter services. In addition, in 2019, Council also removed the requirement that shelters be more than 250 metres away from one another and within 80 metres of a major road. This additional layer of restriction placed only on homeless shelters was viewed as potentially discriminatory, and the City Council responded. So as I said, we've made excellent headway in just 18 months. We have secured enough facilities for 78% of the beds, and we have actually opened 60% of those beds at the end of last year, with another 143 beds coming online this year, so that at the end of 2 years, we will have 75% of those beds operational. So that's more than 3/4 of the project, 1/3 of the way, 2/3 of the way through the expected timeline. This was the geographic picture of Toronto before we started a density map of where shelter services are located. And as you can see, there were many areas in the City of Toronto where if you found yourself without a home, you would have a long distance to go in order to access services. This meant a number of complicating factors for people experiencing homelessness. It often required that you leave your community, you leave your neighborhood. You might be moving away from friends or from family that would further isolate you in the difficult time that you were having. In addition, because of the growth in economic homelessness, we had a growing number of people who were becoming homeless while they were still employed. If you had to travel a long way in order to find overnight accommodation, it did seriously put at risk whether or not you were going to be able to get back to your job each day. And if you weren't, it further complicated the issues if you lost your job. So between 2015 and 2019, this is the change that's happened. There are significantly more programs spread across the city. In fact, we have 7 new locations that are sited outside the downtown core. We've added 4 services to Scarborough, 1 service to Etobicoke, and 2 services to North York. But we wanted to make sure that the opportunity that Council gave us was used to the most benefit of the people that were using these services. So the new shelters are not like the old shelters. We've had a focus on environmental design to improve outcomes. We've developed a new program model that focuses on case management and rapid rehousing. And we've focused on community integration to make sure, as much as possible, these buildings are a benefit to the community that they are being built in. We are designing with housing in mind. So we are building shelters that are focused on room sizes and configurations that can be easily and without a lot more investment into independent support units in the future. We are building in wiring, drainage, plumbing into the rooms to facilitate that future use. And we're maximizing shelter sites as much as possible, thinking about the future when they may be turned into supportive housing. And we have an application into the National Housing Strategy to receive some federal money to partner with us on that conversion of these buildings into supportive housing. Another important element of not only building a better building was building better engagement processes. A couple of quite difficult shelter engagement experiences led us to reevaluate what it looks like to engage with community. And we've developed a new process that we've used in the opening of those new shelters in the last 2 years. And in 2019, we actually did an evaluation of how those first new engagements have gone to ensure that we're always constantly learning. Each community is different. Each community tells us a little bit more about how we can improve our community engagement. We know through that evaluation that we have to create broader understanding of the city's response to homelessness. We have to create increased availability of information about the shelter siting process. How are decisions made? We need to provide communities earlier notice that a service is coming to their community. We need to increase the communication and engagement channels. We need to reach out and ensure that on an ongoing basis that there is community engagement after we've transferred these programs over to the operator to ensure that community stays involved. We've also developed a public awareness campaign entitled More Than Just a Bed, because it was really clear when we started doing some consultations that people had a sense that a shelter was just somewhere where you slept and received a meal while you were homeless. And these programs offer so much more. We needed to make sure that the community understand who was experiencing homelessness, because when you initially talk about that, the majority of people talked about a particular image in their head of who that was experiencing homelessness, and that's actually a very small percentage of the population. We wanted to share information about the new type of shelter, the new type of service, and what it means to a community when a new service is introduced. Prior to building these 1,000 new shelter beds, there had been no service expansion for 10 years. It put us behind the 8 ball, and we've had to do a lot of catching up. However, Toronto continues to grow, and over the next 20 to 40 years, the population is going to increase by almost 4 million people. In order to keep the same per capita shelter bed size that I showed you earlier in this presentation, we need to continue to build shelter beds. We need an ongoing capital project in order to maintain the buildings that we have and also to create capacity that will match the population growth. However, and I can't stress this loud enough, the answer to homelessness is not more shelter beds. In addition to maintaining an adequate shelter system, we also have to continue and expand our focus on long-term solutions, and we need to be able to shift our investments towards prevention and supports. For most people experiencing homelessness, the result of economic issues and the lack of affordable housing, 80% of people use the shelter system once and they leave within 3 months. This is something that most people do not understand. It makes economic sense in that situation that to have an emergency shelter system because you have 5 people over the course of a year using that space. For a smaller group of people, those that are experiencing chronic homelessness, about 20% of the people that use our shelter beds, the issue of homelessness is much more complex. And finding people housing is much more difficult. For these people, it does not make sense to have them in our emergency shelter system because they are not using it as an emergency shelter. They are using it as supportive housing. So Shelter Support and Housing is adopting a new approach, a coordinated access approach that is proven internationally, and we are modernizing how we think about homelessness and how we improve our system to assess needs, prioritize access to the right supportive housing options, to improve housing outcomes, and reduce chronic homelessness. In the last year, using this approach, 80 to 85% of the housing placements that we have matched people with have been successful 1 year later. We are beginning to track data in a very different way to tell a much better story on the health of our shelter system. We need to know how many new people are coming into our shelter system every day, every month. We need to know how many people are coming back into our shelter system, maybe returning from the housing placements that they secured. We need to identify what went wrong in order to make sure we don't make the same mistake again. We need to know who is coming from some of our provincial institutions, who's coming into homelessness directly from healthcare, directly from child welfare, directly from criminal justice. These discharges from provincial institutions into homelessness is a large systemic issue that I think we need to understand a lot more information about. Even though we have 7,000 shelter spaces, many more people use that during the course of the month. In fact, last month, more than 10,000 people used those 7,000 shelter beds. It's important for us to understand how many people are using those beds and how long they're spending in our system. It's important for us to understand who is exiting to housing and who is just sort of disappearing, which is a large amount of people. They go to an inactive status. We need to have a much better understanding of where people go when they leave our system. You heard the city manager talk about results-based accountability in the budget presentation on Friday. This is something that SSHA is going to be adopting, and it speaks very close to my heart about these services. Understanding how much are we doing, how well are we doing it, and at the end of the day, is anybody better off? We're spending a lot of money on these services. Knowing that people are better off as a result is critically important. We want to invest in services and supports that improve people's lives and increase their housing stability. Because as a division, we are committed to our vision that Toronto is a city where everyone has a safe and affordable place to call home. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Members, I think what we'd like to do is maybe take the, have the speakers speak and then maybe go back to staff and have them do questions. So we're going to ask for speakers and we'll get you back later on for questions by members of committee. The first speaker I have is Anna Jessup. Anna Jessup is here? Are you here? Oh, excellent. Ms. Jessup, I don't know if this is your first time here, but if I just go through the rules with you.
Okay.
Is that your daughter that you're with?
That is my daughter.
You can come up if you'd like her to come up with you.
No, she nudges me and kicks me under the table when we do that.
Well, I thought she was taking photos or something like that, so.
She wants me to give her, here, okay, Maxine, you want to read that book, right?
Okay, well, Mom, just take your time and let your daughter get settled. That's fine. Take your time.
Me slowly looking at the phone.
Technology.
Here you go, sweetheart.
All right, are you all set?
I think I am.
Did you thank your mom? Did you thank Mom? So, Ms. Jessup, so you have 5 minutes to speak.
Yeah.
There's a time to your left here.
Yeah.
Take your time.
All right.
When you are through speaking at the end of the 5 minutes, members of committee, and if there are any visiting members, they may ask you questions. They may not.
Okay.
You then are able to respond according to how you wish to respond to their questions.
Okay, great.
At the end of all of that, you will be finished.
All right.
Okay? You are not able to ask questions of the questioners. They're the ones able to ask questions of you. But please take your time and then just watch the clock according. So at five minutes, that will be the end of your speaking time.
Thank you.
Okay? Let me know when you're ready and I will start your time. And then the microphone should work, the light should be on, and just speak into the mic. Thank you and welcome. Thank you.
My name's Anna Jessup. I live at Bathurst and Bloor. I've lived in the annex for approximately 15 years. I've watched a number of my friends become homeless as they entered old age. I've watched homelessness increase to a point that I never thought it would ever reach, and I am desperately worried about the safety of the people in my neighborhood. We're in a state of emergency, and it needs to be addressed as such. When my daughter and I visited the Peter Street shelter to deliver clothing and to participate in a memorial, she and I went inside, and I was stunned because most of the people there were senior citizens. It was full. There was never mind bed space. There was no space in the waiting room. People were sleeping on the floor. It did not look like we were in a developed country. And that's the shelter that people go to when they cannot get any shelter anywhere else. If they cannot get shelter anywhere, that's the shelter they go to get referred. If it's full, there's nothing. Don't let anyone tell you that there is space. This is a state of emergency, and unless this council does something, people will die as a result of inaction. I'm going to read the names of the 1,000 people who have passed away, who have died homeless since they began counting. My friends who will be coming up after me will continue to read the names. These names, every name, is evidence of the need for social housing and emergency shelter, and every name is evidence and needs to be honored. And we must particularly honor the Jane Does, the John Does, because in a developed country, in one of the richest cities, the economic capital of a developed country, people die and we don't know their name. They've disappeared. Mary Emery Hatch, Claude Wolfe, Art Holland, Albert Theron, Harold Wright, Stanley Gilbrot, Michael Johnson, Jim Mitchell, Patrick Stevenstris, Vincent Joseph, Stanley Dancy, Edward Finnegan, John Deedmore, Ralph Vernon, Victor White, Joseph McKenzie, George Fleury, John Orbeau, John Dean, Peter Gautreau, Gerald Combs, Dennis Beauchamp, Eugenia Balcom, Ron Bristol, Anthony Beaches, Steve Sedovic, Ron Emerenson, Tony Gillingham, Walter Kelly, Maurice Austin, Tricia Carpenter, Eddie Carpenter, Linda Cottenham, Bruce Stone, Smokey Johnson, James McIntyre, Clinton Clark, Ron Pierce, Dwight Solomon, Dale Phillips, Jerry Ransom, John Beloki, Danny, John Doe, Richard Rory, John Doe, Thomas Shea, Joe Sabo, Wayne Jean, Erwin Anderson, Marisha Compani, William Carson, Andre Chilok, Gordy Lucky, Junior Keegan, Eugene Upper, Brent Sims, David Chrétien, John Gallagher, Joanna Olive, May Mellinson, Florence Harrison, Garland Shepard, William Hunter, Edmund Yu, Patrick Kaganovich, Lisa Ansey, William Botts, Jordan Haycomp, Stanley Peterson, Wally Nishani, Smokey Houston, Mary Louise, Michael Fairthorne, Calvin Wine-Dubance, David Solomon, Douglas Carey, Gaston Leclerc, Julius Kruginski, Adam Soltiek, John Anston, Randy Nichols, Eric Belotti, Vernon Crow, John Cowboy Hutchins, Wesley Miranka, John Doe, Kathleen Hart, Richard Howard, John Flanagan, Ken Jocko, Mark Fife, Candace Solem, Cliffy, Kevin, Sammy Happy Jack, Richard Corbiere.
Thank you, Ms. Jessup. You're at your 5 minutes. We have
Thank you
another
so much.
speaker. You're welcome. And you said that others will read other names coming forward. That's fine.
Correct.
Thank you. I have Lou Todd. Who's next? Mr. Todd? You also have 5 minutes, sir.
Okay,
And Ms.
all
Jessup,
right.
if I could also ask you, and I don't know whether or not they're reading from the list continuously, but when you're through, if you'd like to submit that list to the clerk, so we would have that for the public record as well.
Thank you so
You
much.
may submit that after you're through, okay?
There's
Thank
a
you.
memorial taking place. These are the people who we know of
Okay.
who have
Thank you.
died since counting began.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Todd, you have 5 minutes, sir.
There you go.
I'll start your time when you're ready, sir. Just let me know when you're ready.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Oh.
Take your time, sir.
My name is Lou Todd, and I also live in Toronto. I'm 54 years old, and I'm happy to be a part of this for the awareness and recognizing that this needs to be addressed. Okay, continuing with the names. Mike Dunisons, Kerry Patrick McDonald, Grant McKenzie, Vince, Oscar LaRenew, Don Wade, Janet, SB, NB, Lester Powis, Jane Doe, Robert Fleming, Richard Bellman, Brian Harold Lockcoo, Ignacy Paludininski, August, Donald Webb, Rudy Koch, Mr. P, John Doe, Herbert Hutton, Matthew Woodley, Danny Cousins, Stephen Redmond, John Doe, Hedy Ann DeGasco, Mark Desmolin, John Doe, Robert Barron, Robert Topilco, Stuart Mitchell, Jennifer Codwell, Eddie Fay, Seguridin Anishlingham, Carabel McKinnon, Mario Morgan, Bill McGrath, John Doe, Donald Newton, John Doe, Ed Court, May Tom Green, Hank Vidurawald, John Curry, Manuel Suss, John Doe, Cassie Smith, Adrian Fillmore, Harriet Eastwood, Donald Tifford, John Doe, Margaret LaRue, Julie Edwards, A.B., John Doe, Michael Anthony Tilley, Mike Larissy, Marlene Hilderman, Roseanne Brolard, Walter Lader, Esperanza Henwood, Salvatore Restivo, Greg Bones Koyan, Barry Proctor, Abdul Dawani, John Dunn, Robert McDonald, Ronald Back, Jane Doe, Mervyn Donald Dustry Fisk, Greta Scott, Daniel Jenny, Rosemary Hunt, A.B., N.B., Joseph Theobald, John Doe, Francis Frank Lewis, Doug Taylor, Kermit Coslin, Leonard McLaren, John Doe, Stephen Lovell, TV, John Doe, Trevor Littlejohn, Tim Hoffman, Willie Wilson, Darrell Cook, Chris Glynn, Leah Singh, CD, Bill West, Joey O'Hara, John Doe, JT, Jean John DePerony, Donnie Gordon, Stephen Shepard, PW, Fred Cheeseborough, Ronnie Windecker, the King of Carlton, Shu Jim Wong, Joy Holmes, Shelley Day, Cody, Helen Fox, June Melanie, Judy Solomon, R.H., George Katasuli, George Adams, Murray Hari, Cato, John Doe, Louise Lau, Stanley Brunskill, John Doe, Quatum Abriha, Jim Makefield, Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Todd. Thank you very much. It's 5 minutes.
Hey, thank you for my time.
You're welcome, sir. The next person to speak is Patty Bezos. Let me know when you're ready, Ms. Bezos, and we'll get you started.
Hello, my name is Patty Bezos, and I'd like to give out the names of people who have died. You know, to be born is human, to die is human, but to live and die on the street is very inhumane. Louise Lowe, Stanley Broskill, John Doe, Joynton Albra, Jim Walkfield, William Hughes, Ricky Snow, Michael Bellagner, Jane Doe, Dolly, Ken Hyatt, Eugene Miller, Pete Marshall, Cecilia, Wayne Gorman, Floyd Anderson, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, Philip Toulouse, Bobby McCline, Marty Bronson, Leonard McGilvery, John Doe, Ray Rhodes, Judy Roberts, Brian, John Doe, Richard Lucas, Aaron George, Michael Jr. Malcolm, Brian Marquette, James Francis Sampson, Steve Allen Begin, Leonard Grosel, Ronnie Redsky, Norma Lewis, Cheryl Lynn Gunn, William Markham, John Mackin, Joey Kirksam, Henry Logan, Leo Siren, Joseph Albert McKenzie, William McRae, Bill Atkinson, John Kagorsma, Albert Katagorsky, Donald Charles Wellesley, Rick Webb, John McRae, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, Albert Thomas Lucas, Melissa, David Maskrin, Thomas Bain, Carlos Hernandez, Randy Angro, John Doe, Bill Russell, Richard Losner, Alan Spoon, James Draper, John Doe, John Walker, Cam Baker, Remy Spence, John Doe, Stuart Turner, Donald Jack Humphrey, Bobby Franklin, John Doe, Margaret Linkler, Louis Ellis, Fred Cullen, Jordan Parker, Jordan Squaltz, Bill Anderson, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, Manuel Baptista, John Doe, Whitney, John Doe, John Doe, Jerry Leach, Harry Wright, John Doe, Mike Rakiopa, Delson Adunay, John Doe, Jan Kitt, John Doe, Daniel O'Brien, John Doe, David Colbeck, John Doe, Jane Doe, Stephen Wells, Robert Burns, John Doe, David Banks, John Doe, Mariana Hendes, John Doe, Rafton, Douglas Hilliard, Alan Kennedy, Joe Bizu, Sam Wiesel, Joan Dwyer, John Doe, Tony Paris, John Doe, Paul Richards, John Doe, Ray Benoit, John Doe, Bouffard Chester, John Doe, Jackie Escort, John Doe, John Grenville, John Doe, Alexander Enver, John Doe, Daniel Johnson, Don Joe, Ken Finn, Norman Besris, John Doe, Terrace Dubik, Carl Fox, John Doe, Diane Marshall, Donald Steller, John Doe, Larry Callahan, John Doe, David Rees, Jane Doe, John Doe, Herbie Scarfy, John Doe, Howard Enrose, Jack Hebert, John Doe, Michael French, John Doe, Thomas Cousins, John Doe, Johnny Aston Romance, Abdeen Mohammed, Roger Dusson, Paul Bennett, Joseph Rascolo, Aldroli Eddy, Martin Lang, John Doe, Luke Mack, Jane Doe, John Doe, James LaPierre.
5 minutes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Louis George. Mr. George. You have 5 minutes also, sir. Let me know when you're ready, sir. I'll start your time.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir.
My name's Louis George, and I'm here to emphasize the urgency at which we need shelters for homeless people. It's a matter of life and death for many. In 2015, over 50 people died. In 2019, 50 people died that were homeless. Also, keep in mind many of these people have disabilities or medical conditions or are aging. The average age in these years were a little over 50 years old. Okay. So I'll pick up. 2008, Byron de Bastiage, Jean Bellec, Robert Maurice, Randy Moreau, Joseph Daniel Charest, Leonard Piquercy, Louis Marshall, Michael Garastant, Feduma Samau, William Dunlop, Claudia Alamos, Deacon Howie, Justin Mazzatelli, Biniam Seleshi, Dennis Bowen, George the General Delane, Carolyn Connolly, John Massey, Patrick Ross DeVinci, Robin Porteous, Howie Wilson, Michael Ennis, Alexander Goldie, Daniel Lepine, Yvonne, Jane Doe, Rob Ferguson, Eric Aman, Rhonda Hawk, James Jim Anderson, April D., Tim Ward, Andrew Carpenter, Jamie Lawson, Alexandra Smith, Mike Garnet, Benson George Smith, Al Gosling, John Doe, Douglas Blaker, Moshe Michael, Stephen Gushy, Jesse James, Helen Hughes, Robert Noyes, Horace Harris Saunders, Ken Wolf Gamble, Gordon Eldridge, Silent Sam Seguch, George Rusinski, Adam Simpson, Alfred Fitzpatrick, John Doe, Lorraine Gracie Beavis, Greg Kutskakin, Jerry Kutskakin, Evelyn Atkinson, Marcel Metten, C.W., Ozzy Oswald, Mary Lynn Shuchuk, S.L., initials R.M., C.Z., G.W.H., L.H.P., D.H., Billy Smith, Kenny Ogden, Gary G., Lisa Nuki Palmero, Klaus Lietzman, Florence Duck, Anita Kopgag, Greg Hodgkins, Lucy Carpenter, Samantha Shamanda Landon, Dwayne Wink, MD, DC, John Doe, Kenneth Hentz, Tony Clemens, Lisa Vajagas, Leanne Freeman, Francois Frenchy Belisle, AJ, RB, HS, Helena Boutelier, John Doe, William Buss, John Doe, Cindy Foster, John Doe, George Falwell, Louis Quinn, Bill Brandt, Jose Valderez, Martin Ashkew, Robert Chrysler, William Bill Robert Downey, Steve Kears Jordan, Tony Garassi, Michael Rankin, High Tech Andy, Arthur Lewitt, Peter Goreski, Jane Doe, Alan Milne, John Doe, Andrew Frizz Silifant, Stuart Poirier, Jonas Asfa, Judy Battaglio, Charles Troy Barton, Donald Booker, Cayenne Fox, Robert Osborne, Stephen McDonald, Darren Olson, Chris Forsey, Tara Janine Gardner, Rob Young, Ricky Paul Meserol, Cassandra Baldock, Clayton Powis, Martin Baird, Kevin Clark, Frank Martin, Arthur Sickles, Randy Colborn, Dennis Verekik, John Doe, Sidney Archibald, Robert Recollet.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Jane
5
Doe,
minutes.
thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person to speak, I'm going to try this name, is Bogos Kalem Korean?
Kalem Kiarian.
Okay. Thank you, sir. You have 5 minutes as well, sir. Thank you. Let me know when you're ready. I'll start your time.
Okay, I'm ready.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Bogos Kalem Kiarian. I'm the resident of Ward 11. And while I applaud all the work that council is doing on behalf of the homeless vis-a-vis the shelter system. Recently, I heard about the 40,000 unit subsidized housing projects that the mayor has announced, and I believe very strongly that that is the way to go. The way to address the homeless problem is not by building more shelters, is by building more subsidized units. 40,000 sounds like a great number, and apparently the city has $8.5 billion allocated for this project, and you're waiting upon another $15 billion from federal and provincial governments. I would strongly suggest and encourage you to start the project right away and not wait for the federal provincial governments to kick in, because we're in a crisis situation. There are 10,000 people homeless in the city of Toronto at a minimum. I will continue with the list in memoriam of all the people that have died. If you just give me a moment. I'm going to jump to 2015, and I'm certainly not going to be able to get through to the present day. I'm just going to probably get maybe 100 names in here. So in 2015, there were 50 deaths reported. Sergio, Markham, Shabir Jafar, Al-Lu, Glenn Abram, Grant Gunnar Faulkner, James Boy Ignatz, John Doe, Man Huya, John Doe, Kumera Velu Kana Gaskaram Pillai, Thomas Charles Hall, John Doe, Clayton Chevrier, John Doe, Jane Doe, John Doe, Daniel Joseph Campbell, Jamie Patrick Jones, Avatar Sandhu, John Doe, David Westendorp, Gerrard Murak, Earl Sivret, Ossie Carrera, John Doe, Robert Kenville, Jane Doe, John Doe, Brad Chapman, John Doe, Edward Marcel, Jason, Ballantyne, John Doe, Orazio Zizi, Richard Van der Schilden, Charles Martin, Weldon Savoy, David William Brown, Anthony William Flint, Jane Doe, Larry Lawrence Raponi, John Doe, Jane Doe. HN, Jason Carasulo, Beverly Bernardine, Brian Abel Coquat, John Doe, Jane Doe, Houston Kenwin Clark Leckie, Dean Hamilton, John Doe, Jane Doe, John Doe, Ramsey Whitefish, Ivan Nova, John Doe, Jane Doe, Dean Lissowick, John Doe, Jane Doe, Paul Crombie, Megan Princess Johnson, Stephen Doyle, John Doe, excuse me, Lawrence Cook, Jane Doe, Kenneth Matthew Dargan, Kenneth Lyons, Paul McCann, Gregory John McVoy. 2017, 54 deaths. Chris, John Doe, Jane Doe, John Paul, Joshua Parisian, Stephen Tiny Sharon, Pierre Gregoire, Jane Doe, Bradley McLean.
Sir, I'm going to give you 20 more seconds because of the delay, so please, you've got 20 more
All right,
seconds.
thank
okay?
you.
Please.
Bradley McLean, Navneet Sondhi, William Peters, Jane Doe, John Doe, Mickey Christian Sennison, Sahid Mohammed, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John Doe, John
sir.
J.L. Lowther.
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, we have the next person I have on my list is Howard Bortenstein, Cabbagetown Coalition. Mr. Bortenstein? Is that you, sir?
Yes, it is.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Welcome. I don't know if you've been here before, sir. You have?
Yes, I have.
You have. Okay, great. So you have 5 minutes to speak? Okay, thank you. Let me know when you're ready, sir.
I will. I'm Howard Bortenstein. I'm joined by Ms. Karen Marin, and I'm a member of the Cabbagetown Coalition. We're a grassroots group of Cabbagetown residents and businesses, and which is also supported by local residents associations, with the sole mandate of addressing the safety and security concerns related to the new respite shelter proposed at 233 Carlton Street. And then when I say that includes the service users, not only the residents and the business, but the people who avail themselves of, who need these services. First, I'd like to clearly state 2 important points. We believe respite shelters are an important and vital service for the City of Toronto. And 2, we fundamentally reject the assertion that Cabbagetowners who oppose the siting of this particular proposed respite center at 233 Carlton is a NIMBY reaction. Ward 13 currently has 1,730 shelter beds, 24% of the total shelter beds in the city, which were including 42% of the municipal shelter beds. Cabbagetowners are committed to doing our fair share to relieve the stress on the poor and the vulnerable in the City of Toronto, as we have done for decades. As at the October 30th, 2019 council meeting, Councillor Wong Tam, which I thank, said Ward 13 carries the burden of the shelter system on their backs. Cabbagetowners are generous and inclusive, and we will not allow ourselves to be treated unfairly as the only ward in our city to carry this burden. In 2017, when Council approved the new emergency shelter development process, a fundamental principle of the process that when siting shelter facilities, a whole government approach would be used, which would result in a better and quicker siting decisions. The critical information missing from this process is the accounting for local community impacts in the downtown east and in Cabbagetown. The downtown east 5-year action plan articulates those wraparound costs that are required to be successful. Some of the other additional costs are additional policing requirements and the need to collect needles and syringes that have been discarded on roads and sidewalks, and some of them end up in our schoolyards, the 3 schoolyards, which is in the vicinity of this location. The incorrect assumption, at least as far as Cabbagetown is concerned, that there's enough capacity to handle these problems without needing more resources. For example, 3 months ago in Cabbagetown South, Moss Park, where 233 Carlton is located, Toronto Police Service had to double the community neighbourhood officers from 4 to 8 dedicated officers. Even with the additional officers, the police are overwhelmed. And the TPS publicly stated that they need more officers to deal with the current level of lawlessness in Cabbagetown. Moreover, since community engagement does not start until after the city has purchased or leased property, a shoot first and ask questions later approach, none of these costs are identified or included for consideration in siting decisions. With respect to 233 Carlton, if these real costs, which we believe are substantial, are added to the $9.8 million project, the total cost exceeds the delegated authority of the city manager. More importantly, would the project have been approved with the increased costs? When City Council approved the new emergency shelter development process, a condition for executing the delegated authority was that the specific shelter must meet applicable zoning bylaws. That was explicit. The 233 Carlton does not meet that condition. An application to the Committee of Adjustment has been submitted. The city manager was ultra vires of the delegated authorities when he approved the project. 233 Carlton should have been filtered out for consideration as a possible shelter location, as there is no certainty that the landlord will prevail at C of A or at TLAB if appealed. Many questions remain unanswered. SSHA had authority to site shelter services anywhere in the city. Then why are they opening up a new shelter service in a ward that already has the highest concentration of shelter beds and local service programs in the city and overwhelmed with lawlessness? Why? Not because the relocating respite center is nearby. It is 2.2 kilometers.
Thank you, sir. 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, sir. Okay. Those are all the speakers that I had on this particular matter. We will now invite members to ask questions of staff. We'll start with visiting members first. Councillor Wong-Tam, do you have questions for staff?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Mr.
Welcome.
Chair, and through you to staff. With respect to the report that you've outlined before us, it seems to me that you've identified areas that where the new shelter model siting has worked well. And then there's also some areas of improvement that have been identified in this report. Can you just highlight for us what those areas of improvements are and what type of adjustments are you making to ensure that the next time it's rolled out, you actually see those improvements?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Yes, in the evaluation that we did last year, we identified areas that we could make improvements in the shelter siting process. One of those areas was greater coordination internally at the city in terms of the dissemination of information. So facilities disseminates information when they purchase a building, which is separate from when we start to share information about new service. So that was one area that we can see some clear improvement. We've also identified the need to engage people earlier in the process. Currently, our schedule is that we start involving people about 6 months ahead of the opening, and we need to do that earlier. The other area we've identified that we can do improvement is to support the ongoing engagement in communities. So there is a need for a community liaison committee at the front end as the shelter is developed and opens in a community, but we also want to provide ongoing support to the operator to maintain that community conversation.
And would you say that with the siting of 233 Carlton, even though it's not a shelter, but it does have a 24-hour component to it, the fact that the delegated authority form that was posted on the city's real estate website went out first, the community was largely taken by surprise, but the new enhancements that you've just described, are they being accelerated so that this particular location in this community is going to get the benefit of that?
Yes, Councillor. We have fast-tracked some of the community engagement, so we have hired third-party community facilitators who are already engaged in conversations within the community. We have an electronic newsletter that has been established that will be going out to community as a way to establish some communication. There is an email communication list that's been developed. We also have a community information session scheduled for January 21st as an opportunity for the community to come and speak to city staff about various elements of the program.
And thank you, that's very helpful. And then with respect to how this service is being cited and any new additional services, recognizing the service density and capacity that's already contained in the downtown east, how will the service coordination be improved moving forward in terms of citing new services or perhaps enhancements to service?
Yes, councillors. So we will need to be very coordinated with SDFA as we determine whether or not there are new services and how that impacts the Downtown East plan as that rolls out over the next 5 years. We did look for a location within the vicinity of the existing location to facilitate current service users and future service users. The building at 233 Carlton met those requirements. But we do recognize the need to provide some ongoing increased support and coordination between our two divisions.
Okay. So recognizing the Downtown East Action Plan was an interdivisional collaboration. There's many different divisional partners at the table. But my understanding is that the Downtown East Action Plan, the division lead belongs to SDFA. Is that not correct?
The division lead for the coordination is SDFA. The siting of shelters and the choice of where those goes is with Shelter Support and Housing.
And so to make sure that this works together, you folks will be meeting more regularly to share information and data so we don't see this happen again. Is that correct?
Yes, Councillor. Both SSHA and SDFA are in constant communication and collaboration on this. The work of the Downtown East 5-year action plan, coordinated through SDFA, has a strong partnership with several divisions, but an especially strong one with SSHA.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fletcher, the question? Thank you, Councillor Winton.
Yes, it's just about the community liaison committees, and specifically how closely you're monitoring them. There was one that was established through City Council for the new Salvation Army Hope Shelter in Leslieville, the New Hope Leslieville, which is working very well. But somehow, it seems to me that what was approved by the city isn't the carry forward committee now at that site. Can you explain how that could happen?
Through the chair. Yes, a community liaison committee typically starts about 6 months ahead of a shelter opening and typically goes about 6 months into its operation. The shelter at Leslieville opened in January of 2018. The Community Liaison Committee stopped meeting about a year into that, so by the end of 2018, and didn't meet again until August of this year, when it was identified that there were some issues that the community needed a voice to bring those concerns to.
Was that not actually canceled by the former councillor?
Councillor, I can't speak to the exact circumstances by which the committee stopped meeting. It is not unusual for them to stop meeting about 6 months in. I'm not aware of that information.
I guess the motion's very clear that it would be ended based on a conversation with the two councillors. So perhaps that didn't happen.
You're right, Councillor. The motion was quite explicit.
It's quite explicit, and that didn't take place then. We agreeing on that?
I will agree on that.
Thank you. So if I'm to ask you to go back and have the original committee considered by the Salvation Army, is that something that you can do? Because they are funded through the city, is that not? They're part of our shelter system, is that right? Yeah.
Yes. So, Councillor, my understanding that when the CLC was reconvened in August, the agency reached out to the people that had typically been involved in the CLC, so those that came most regularly to the meetings, and also those in the community that had shared new concerns. They were invited to the meeting in August, and that group decided to meet thereafter on a quarterly basis. But it is possible for us to go back to the agency. There is another meeting being planned for later this month, I believe, and ask them to expand the invitation to the original members.
So the terms of reference for community liaison committees and those, you're tracking those based on shelters that have been set up, making sure everything's working well with those. Am I right or wrong?
No, you're right, Councillor, but again, it is an area where we identified in our evaluation that community...
Asking if you're tracking that those exist associated with different shelters, yes?
Yes, Councillor.
You are. So those terms of reference are no doubt somewhere, they've been all tabled, as far as I know, over the last number of years, tabled at council or at committee. So you have all of those on file.
They wouldn't be tabled at committee or council. They would be owned by the agency that is having the community liaison committee, and I would imagine that they would be in the file that we have with each agency that we have a contract with.
Right. So are councillors on community liaison committees generally? They were on this one previously. Councillor McMahon was on it, and I was on it.
The decision to participate in the CLC is at the discretion of the councillor.
It was the terms of reference that were approved by council. So I think I'm going to refer the terms of reference, ask you to refer both the original terms of reference and the existing one. I think we have a problem here, since when you approve something, one assumes that something's carrying through.
Question?
Would you not think from a community standpoint that would be...
The draft terms of reference that were circulated with the meeting invite in January are a draft that will be discussed and endorsed by the committee in January. They are not, they have not been endorsed or approved at this point. So once the committee has had an opportunity to discuss and approve and make changes to that terms of reference, then that will be the new sort of official document.
There's no draft written
Councillor
on
Presser.
here.
Well, that was your last question.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're bringing the matter into committee now. Councillor Cressy, the question.
Thank you, Chair. And to our GM of SSHA, when we're looking at the metrics by which we define success within our homelessness response, how do we define success? Is it the capacity within the shelter system, or is there another metric around the number of people housed each month?
Through the chair. So the most well-known metric is the one where we are targeting 90% capacity as a measure of success. I don't feel that that does measure success. It measures how many people are in the system, not how well the system is serving those people.
So would there be, not to decide today, but conceivably a different measurement of success, such as we have fewer people who are homeless each month, or each month we're able to transition more people out of homelessness? Would there be another measurement that we should use as our guiding framework for how we're doing on this file?
Yes, and in fact, we're working on those now. If we go, think back to the last slide, we said that we want to be able to measure homelessness based on whether or not it's rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. That forms a great basis for some accountability measures that we should be reporting on to know if people are any better off.
Okay. In the report, you spoke a little bit around, I think, on coordinated access. I think it was in here, sort of the process by which we are working to identify all the individuals in the system so that we can help to transition and ensure it's rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. So of the 8,000 or so people who are homeless or in our system tonight, and the 27,000 or so who went through our system last year, how many, do we have names for each and every person? Do we know who they are? Do we have their background for every single one, or just a small segment of them?
So through the chair, we have a shelter management information system that all of the shelters across the sector use. And that records, it's sort of a bed management system at the moment. It records basic information about everybody that is using the shelter. So their age, their name, their gender, their length of stay. What we're trying to do through coordinated access is develop a more robust information tool where we in fact know more about that person and more about what that person needs to be successfully housed. That assessment is being used in all of our new shelter sites, so it's part of the new shelter model, and we're seeking to expand that now that we're sort of taking a whole system approach across all of the programs.
Okay, so the basic premise there being that the current information we have now allows us to know who they are and how old they are, but it doesn't give us the information that perhaps is necessary to help ensure we're providing the supports to transition people out of the system.
That's correct. Most of that would be sort of individual case files that staff have at different shelters, but as we know, people use different services, and so the ability to have sort of one central piece of information on each person as opposed to little bits across the system would be extremely helpful.
Okay. Page 19 in the report, this is where you go through how long people are using the shelter system. And so my quick calculation here is 23% of those who are using our system are staying for 183 days or more, so 6 months or more. Is that right?
Yes, Councillor.
And so would we define chronic homelessness as those who are staying 6 months or more? Is that 23% what we would call chronic homeless?
So it's a little bit of a mixed definition. We include people who have been homeless for 6 months or more. We also include people who have had 180 days of homelessness in the last year, because often people experience episodic homelessness where they're in and out of our shelter system, and we don't want to discount that as also being extremely difficult for people.
Do we know, so for that 23% who are experiencing 100 days or more of homelessness in any given year, do we have a breakdown on how much it costs to shelter that 23% versus how much it would cost to house that 23%?
We have done that calculation, Councillor. I don't have it off the top of my head. What we do know is that the average shelter bed is about $100 to $110 a night, and that is significantly more expensive than it would cost to operate a supportive housing unit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Just final question, if you have.
Just last final question. Based on other jurisdictions and responses you've seen, can we end chronic homelessness? That's that population who are, for all intents and purposes, living in our shelters.
Councillor, yes, we absolutely can. I think it's a problem that SSHA and, in fact, the City of Toronto cannot do on our own. The reasons why people are experiencing homelessness, especially long-term homelessness, is very complicated. We do need the support from other orders of government, and we need to make sure that we are focusing on the long-term and upstream solutions while also trying to take care of the immediate. But if we ignore those, we will continue to have a growing number of immediate needs with no end in sight.
Thank you. Councillor Lai, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair, by the way, it's a nice report and a nice presentation. On page 5 of your report, it says about the you have currently planning 7 new shelter sites outside the downtown core, and includes 4 in Scarborough, 1 in Etobicoke, and 2 in North York. Are these sites up and running, or what's the timeline for that?
I believe those ones referenced there are all up and running or in the process of being up and running now.
So I see the map on page 11 about, so there isn't any shelter that are in existence in Ward 22 and Ward 23 in Scarborough, is that correct?
That's correct, and we don't have any locations either in those wards, so it continues to be an area that is service poor.
So are you planning to have some, you're still looking for some sites in those 2 areas?
As part of the overall infrastructure project, we still have 2 to 3 buildings to find. So amongst a large number of criteria, looking to fill that service gap is also one of the things that we're seeking to do.
Okay. And also in your community engagement process, you talk about the liaison, the community liaison committee. Who forms this committee? Is that?
So it's formed at the beginning of shelter siting with the help of our third-party facilitator. The operator who is going to operate the program, and also in consultation with the local councillor. So we typically ask questions about who are the key stakeholders in the community. Is there a BIA? Is there a residents association? Who are the key business leaders, thought leaders in the community, and try to make sure that those people are engaged in the community liaison committee.
Would you have any diversity component to this committee?
Councillor, it's something we've not formalized, but you do raise an excellent point, and maybe something else that we can add to our list of improvements to monitor the diversity on those committees.
It's just like, when we form committees in the city, we throw into the diversity component to it. So also on your presentation, you're mentioning about a public awareness campaign. I'm just wondering whether you have any consideration in giving the diversity of people that don't speak the language, English language in Toronto, whether these public awareness campaign are being with different languages.
Again, Councillor, excellent point. We are looking at having the materials that we distribute translated. We are lucky enough to have a really diverse workforce. And so as we're thinking about the public engagement opportunities, like going to community festivals, public spaces, we'll also be paying attention to what is the demographic in that community and trying to ensure that we have that representation in the staff that will be attending.
So basically, I think a lot of newcomers to Toronto, they probably don't speak the language, and I think it'd be nice to. They are the most vulnerable people too, so we can look after them. Okay, thank you. That's my questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lai. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and very eye-opening presentation, to say the least. Page 5, 134 increase in 4 years is staggering. But I look at the next page, on page 6, where the most shelter beds per capita in Canada, and we have this information from requests across the country. And if I add up Hamilton, Peel, Regent, Durham, York, and Halton, that adds 125 beds altogether compared to our 249. On this information and data that we have, is this just for Toronto, or are we looking more as a region? Are we looking at Mississauga and Brampton, or this is just the data we're collecting for Toronto?
So the 249 shelter beds is strictly within the geographic area of Toronto. It does not include the outlying areas.
No, but just when you're saying we're collecting data now on where these people are coming from, and I have talked to a number of people over the years that coming from Sudbury, they come down here looking for work, or coming from Hamilton, and they kind of they don't find work and they end up in our system. I also heard a story where one of the municipalities around us, somebody went for service, they didn't have it, they put them in a cab and sent them to Toronto. So that's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on Councillor Wong Tam's ward and Councillor Cressy's ward. They seem to gravitate to downtown. Are we working with other municipalities to find out, what are they building? Are they building more beds, or are they just sending everybody to Toronto?
Well, as slide 7 shows, there has been very little to none service growth in those communities. We are thinking in terms of a regional strategy to homelessness. We're looking to engage the provincial government around those discussions as well, to ensure that there's some expectation for our regional partners to provide service. But you are right, there is an increasing number of stories where people are arriving at our services, having been put in transportation by either a healthcare. We've had people sent from a hospital in Brampton and areas in a cab and sent down to our services, from other social service agencies in the outlying areas, sent very specifically to get our service because they have none to offer.
So is Brampton, you named Brampton, I didn't want to name Brampton, you named Brampton. Where are they getting that information? Where to send them down to Councillor Wong Tam's ward or Councillor Crescent? Where are they getting that information? the municipality send somebody in a cab to Toronto?
Yeah. I can't tell you where they would get that information. I do know there are multiple information sources, so all of our information is on the website. We advertise our central intake function, our referral function at 129 Peter Street as a place where people can walk in and get a referral. That is a place where a lot of people are sent directly to 129 Peter Street in an effort to find a shelter referral.
So there's talk, you say, of a regional strategy? Or is that started, or, I mean, I look at page 17 also, you're showing the numbers at 2041 where we're going to be going. I mean, I think a regional strategy is, you know, we have to do that because these numbers are staggering, right? And I know you know that, but is that, those talks started with the province? And, you know, and I was very surprised to see your number that I think they leave the shelter after 3 months. I forget what the percent was. That was kind of encouraging, but do we know where they're going? I mean, you know, that person I talked to came from Sudbury. You know, can we work to get them back home to Sudbury or back to Hamilton with you know, to get them back home?
Yes, so I mean, that's one of those options that we're using around the common assessment tool is there an opportunity for family reunification? Is there an opportunity to connect them back with their, you know, home community? So those are definitely things that we're trying to do to build into our system to relieve some of the pressure. The City of Toronto is very interested in a regional response. There's not as much interest from our regional partners at this point, but we are, you know, encouraging them to come to the table, and certainly it has been an ongoing request at the province for them to consider this a regional issue, especially as much as people travel throughout the region.
Does the province seem to be getting where we're coming from?
We have not had a response back to our request at this point.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grimes. Speakers, any visiting members to speak? Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you. And I want to thank staff for the report. I do appreciate that you've highlighted for us things that have worked, things that did not work so well, and then the step forward to improve the process. So I want to thank you for that. And also just to recognize that I know that you're doing a phenomenal amount of work given the resources and the social demands around in the community. And I do recognize that you are doing the very best you can to make sure that the shelter facilities or perhaps respites are literally across the city so that people don't have to travel, you know, dozens of kilometers to get help. They can probably be able to, at some point, be able to get services in their own communities and stay connected to their social and family supports. So I just want to recognize that that is the work that you are doing, and I don't want to take anything away from that. The sighting of the 233 Carlton drop-in, I know that we have gone off on the wrong foot. Let's just say it that way. I'm fairly confident that we can probably be able to get back on the right path so we can do this good work together. I do recognize the contributions and the feedback coming from the deputants from the Cabbagetown Coalition. They are weary of taking on additional social services when sometimes it feels like on our streets and laneways we can barely handle what we have now. To be quite honest. So there should be no judgment to the fact that communities are alarmed by being asked to take on more when they don't feel like they can get in front of the social challenges and basically at the heart of what all this anxiety is safety. And this is not a community that's not urbanized or that they don't understand that poverty is not a very attractive thing. They certainly do get that, but just because they have had a really rough summer and a few rough years, this has just been a bit of a surprise to them. So we'll work with them to sort through some of those existing challenges and concerns to hopefully land in a forward-facing direction that will be good for everyone. I do want to say something about the overall process of siting new facilities and services in the downtown east. I think we all know the statistics. You folks, just by way of coming to work to City Hall, you will have crossed our threshold of many neighborhoods, and you can see the despair and the decay that seems to be mounting on our streets. People have no spaces to go to, and so there will always be a need for emergency shelters. I think we would be somewhat naive to think that we won't need them. When 650 Parliament fire took place, we needed to find a place for 1,000 individuals plus. So we need to have those emergency shelter beds when an emergency takes place. But for those who are finding themselves into the shelter system, what we haven't done very well probably is give them a pathway out of homelessness, and which is, I think, vitally important as we begin what I hope to be this new chapter of a renewed dialogue with the federal government, who seems very keen to come to the table to address this issue by way of even having a national housing strategy. Is it fully funded? Is it operational? We'll work out the detail, but at least they're at the table and they're talking to us, and I'm very encouraged by that. And I think that there has been some movement even at the province with the housing benefit. This is not an insignificant amount, but the details are still left to be sorted out, and we won't know how it works. We won't know who's going to qualify until after they pass the provincial budget in April, and then it goes to the service managers across the province. So I think we need to get really clear about what we want that housing benefit to do, so we can actually keep people housed, but also to move people out of shelters into permanent, a form of supportive housing, transitional homes, or permanent, deeply affordable social housing. So the continuum of housing has got to be there in the plethora that we need, the variety of it, but we cannot ease up on the pedal. Right now, I think that we've done a fairly good job of just pushing forward, saying we need more, but I would not rest on our laurels, even if you hit that 1,000 shelter beds, because the demand, unfortunately, the tsunami effect is still coming. And because the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges we have in the core of the city, and actually in Toronto, is we don't have regional coordination. And by way of not having regional coordination, Toronto is always going to bear the brunt of the download from across the province. So these stories that, Councillor Grimes may have heard, and certainly I've heard them all over George Street with Seton House, those stories will continue to escalate if we don't get the province thinking proactively around relocation and regional coordination. And I really
Thank you,
hope
Councillor. You
that,
had 5 minutes.
yeah, I really hope
Thank
that
you.
that's what the mayor is going to be focused on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Cressy to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have a motion, if it can be placed on the screen, which is to, and it's been advance circulated, to direct our Deputy City Manager in consultation with SSHA, SDFA, the Housing Secretariat, and TCHC to report back on the steps required to end chronic homelessness. And I articulate some of the information I think is required as part of that. Let me begin, first of all, by thanking our staff in Shelter Support and Housing Administration. There are enormous upstream challenges as it relates to escalating homelessness. Poverty is going up, unemployment is going up, we have lower OW rates, we have a strained rental housing market, and we have a region in the GTA that does not provide the same type of services we do. All of that combines to put exceptional strain on our system, on our emergency response system, which is what the shelter system is. And we've seen in recent years a near doubling in funding and capacity, and I would say, impressive move to get those 1,000 new beds open. And so I want to commend and thank our staff for that hard work. The impetus behind my motion here is, notwithstanding that exceptionally hard work, I do believe that we need a bold rethink when it comes to homelessness in our city. What is the goal? Is the goal to ensure that we have a 90% capacity rate for people to access a shelter? Or is the goal to end chronic homelessness so that when people enter our shelter system, as our staff have said, it's rare, it's brief, and it's reoccurring? What is the goal? And how do we define that metric for success? Is it on a monthly basis, how many people are homeless, or how many people we transitioned out of homelessness? Again, or is it an entry point into a shelter? What are we trying to do? Shelter people or end homelessness? And so to that end, there's no question as a city that we, first of all, need a dignified and appropriate emergency shelter system. And we need to understand, in a growing population that we have, what the capacity is in that system. We also, on a second point, need a pathway out of that system. And then I would say, on a third pillar here, is we need a citywide focus on that 23% of people who are living in shelters, the chronic homelessness. In the 5+ years I've been here, we've doubled capacity. with hard work and deep care and compassion, it seems to me that the situation, notwithstanding that work and compassion, has got worse, not better. We're spending $250 million a year on a shelter system. And so I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here when it comes to chronic homelessness. We just have to look to other jurisdictions. In Canada, Edmonton, Hamilton, Medicine Hat, other countries, Finland, for example. And I have lots of ideas, as do staff, whether it's coordinated access and the data model around it, interdivisional and intergovernmental coordination, a capital budgeting model whereby the ratio, you are investing more in your prevention and solutions than you are in your emergency response. And so I will simply close by saying that our staff have done tremendous hard work, and I'm deeply grateful to them. I think they have shown, as had this committee and this chair in particular, deep compassion. But when it comes to chronic homelessness, we need a big rethink, and I'm committed to being part of that piece of work with this committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. We have a question of you. Councillor Grimes, a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my friend, Councillor Cressy, after 1A, you've got 1 and 2. Would you consider a friendly amendment after Toronto, put Toronto and the GTA, and then number 2, Toronto and the GTA? And I wouldn't mind seeing those numbers broken out, specifically for Toronto, but also on your talk about the region. It'd be nice to have those numbers, what's happening around. So Toronto and the GTA on both of those?
I'll reciprocate to my friend, Councillor Grimes, as well. Yes, I would see it as very friendly in the number of people experiencing homelessness in Toronto and the Greater Toronto area.
I'll leave you to change that. Would be great.
Yep. In Toronto and the GTA, if we could do that.
Toronto and the GTA.
Do we want the word GTA or region?
Oh,
region?
We're talking about
Greater
region here, right?
Huh?
So the Greater Toronto region.
Region, right.
So in Toronto and the Greater Toronto
Greater
region.
Toronto region.
Is that good to you guys? Okay. Is that good, Toronto? Is that
That's
good?
number 2. That's great. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, okay.
Collaboration.
That is a friendly amendment.
Kristen Wong-Tam. That was helpful. Thanks. All right. Anyone else to speak? Councillor Lai, did you wish to speak? Right, you have a motion, right? Is there a motion ready?
Yep.
Your motion is ready. There we are, Councillor.
All right, first of all, again, thanks for the good report and the good work that staff has been doing. And here I go again. It's about the most vulnerable people. Their mother tongue might not be English. And I think, there's a huge amount of those kind of people out there that we need to cover. And I think we need to be more detailed in addressing the language issue as well as the diversity issue. So basically, it's as read. And questions?
Much, Councillor. Councillor Carroll, do you have a question? Or?
It's friendly amendments all around.
Okay.
I'm thinking in terms of the experience I'm having setting up one of these committees right now with the facility. And I don't usually add this, but I'm going to, in this case, include a diversity component in the membership of the liaison committee in consultation with the local councillor. Because what I don't want to see is just a superficial, let's find somebody from an agency and fill a slot. It should be about diversity because it is needed within this particular site, this location. We're dealing with that now, needing to know that there's going to be translation in simplified, making sure that we're tapping in to a parent council, even though many of the people there will need that translation service. So in consultation with the local councillor, they'd not only get the diversity component, but that is meaningful on the ground, because we know who on the ground is going to need that extra push to get into the liaison committee. So I would just add of the liaison committee in consultation with the local councillor to make sure. Yeah. Okay. Yep, thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. Any further speakers? Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Just thank you. I just want to thank staff, and we've had discussions on this particular matter. I asked for this report to come forward. I'm delighted that it's actually here. It identifies a number of critical issues and so on. It also talks about the pathway that staff is actually utilizing in order to address, as we all know, a very fundamental problem. We've had lots of speakers here today on the 1,000 people who the names that were read out here. I don't know if all 1,000 names were read out, but clearly we were, here to receive that information. It's not lost on any of us on this very problematic challenge. I know the mayor's office has just released a statement on this issue, and I support the comments that we made by the mayor's statement about the need for other levels of government also to assist. And I thought part of the conversation that we've had here this morning speaks to the regional necessity to address these problems. Councillor Grimes identified the fact that, and we've all heard the stories about people being put in taxis or being driven to our facilities because we have the ability to address. We are trying to address this issue wholeheartedly and in a wholesale manner, whereas others are not necessarily doing what we're doing. So they're moving their people here. We have folks who are in need. We're spending a large amount of money on this particular issue, and clearly we know we're not there yet. We still have challenges. There are still people who are suffering, people who are dying, and so on, and it's not lost on any one of us. We're all very concerned about what's going on, what's taking place. We're all looking at ways and means that all of our respective wards in our communities can also obviously play a role in addressing these issues. The point's been made about some areas of the community where there is an inordinate number of facilities in those specific areas and the pressure that it's actually causing. We get that as well in an attempt to try to deal with this particular issue. I know that there are issues in terms of impact, and other areas are feeling greater pressure and so on. And so the work is not done. There's a lot of work that's going on. I want to commend our staff, Ms. Bedard and the team for the work that they're doing and the care that they're giving to this very important issue and the attention that's being focused on and so on. And the point has been made about the 23% that are obviously chronically exposed to homelessness and so on. What do we do about that? How do we do this? How do we help this group of people? I think if you look at the charts and so on, you see, though, that there's a lot of good work that's being done. People are they're getting into our system, they're staying for a shorter period of time. We're helping them with housing and so on. So it's not like nothing is being done. I do get to places in the city where people look at me and tell me nothing is being done for homelessness and so on. And I start to help them to understand. At the end of the conversation, they say to me, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And part of the issue for us is that we have to also communicate what we're doing. And so it's not a situation where we're trying to fight anybody. We're trying to fight for people to help them. And I think all of us are mindful that that particular fact, we do want to help. It's the humanity in all of our psyche, if you will, that we need to make sure that we understand and the impact. And we don't want any more people dying on our streets at all. We want to be able to help people. And it's something that is it's on all of us and the leadership of the mayor and others and so on to help us. And so again, thank the staff for this report, and we continue to work to address this issue. We have a number of motions. We have a motion by Councillor Cressy. We'll take that motion first. It's been friendly amended by Councillor Grimes, and so we were good with that. Okay, that's fine. So, but I'm just referencing the fact that you had some input. Madam Clerk, can you get that? Just waiting for the motion to come on the screen. Okay, members, the motion is actually on the screen. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And then we have Councillor Lai, your motion. Lai's motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. All right. Wait a second. Okay, so that's the item, members.
Point of order?
Yes.
Point of order?
Councillor Grimes.
I move we move to finish the agenda.
Yes. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Grimes. Yes,
I'm
Councillor
sorry,
Fletcher?
I'm going to have to leave, but agenda item number 2.
Yes.
Deputants are here from, no,
Well,
3.
we're going to,
Number 3.
we're going to be going to that now, Councillor.
I'm hoping you're here then,
Did you want to speak before?
No, I just appreciate the support. I think they're doing fantastic work, and I hope we'll be able to support them 100%.
So you just spoke.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
I apologize to them.
No worries. Thank you very much. Okay, let me just grab my lists of the speakers, and I will then move. Clarice Tatro, Glen Roads Food Bank. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. You will have 5 minutes to speak, and the clock is to your left there, ma'am. Thank you.
Started volunteering there about 20 years ago. We were really, really busy if we served 60 families in a week. Now we provide food for about 250 families every week. That consists of 380 adults and 140 children. This translates to about 25,000 visits in a year. Our boundaries are from Danforth to the lake and from Woodbine to Greenwood. However, we don't rigidly enforce our boundaries. We serve people of all ethnicities, all abilities, all genders, and all ages. 60% of our clients are single. The food bank has no paid staff and is supported by Daily Bread, Second Harvest, the church's congregation, and the local community. We're lucky to have the assistance of over 35 volunteers. In the last year, they've spent over 7,000 hours giving out more than 355,000 pounds of food worth over $550,000. During food bank hours, we host a drop-in. Pastries, cereal, hot and cold drinks are offered in the morning. In the afternoon, we offer snacks and hot and cold drinks. We also host a monthly community dinner serving over 100 people. While the food bank provides groceries, we don't have the time or the resources to provide other services. This is where the food hub steps in. Over the past year, they've offered community meals, cooking courses with a following meal, gardening courses with a communal harvest, and a weekly good food market. During the past election, the Food Hub also offered a Desserts and Democracy workshop, which let clients connect with the candidates in person and advised clients on how and where they could vote. All this activity has made a formerly very quiet church much more viable and turned it into a vibrant neighborhood asset. I'm also part of the Food Hub's partner table. Through the Hub, we've become more connected with other groups and organizations in the community. We've found partners who assist us with food donations, and in addition, we've found partners who will accept leftover perishables, preventing usable foods from going into the waste system. Glen Roads Food Bank at the Glen Roads campus of the East End Regional United Ministry strongly supports the continued funding of the Neighbourhood Food Hub. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just check to see if there are any questions of you, ma'am. Are there any questions for the speakers? Okay, no, there are none. Thank you very much for your presentation, ma'am. Our next speaker is Daniel Taylor, Neighbourhood Food Hub Project. Daniel?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the time, for having us here. I know we're all getting a little hungry, I'm sure. My name is Daniel Taylor.
We're good.
I'm the project manager of the Neighbourhood Food Hub. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the work we've been doing over the past year, what exactly this thing is, and a bit of what we have in store for the future. So a year ago, we asked the question, can we save a vital neighborhood church and a cherished food bank by giving it a new lease on life as a community food hub? So not only a place that provides food for people that need it the most, but it teaches them how to grow it themselves, how to cook, how to preserve, how to harvest. It's about making more affordable, nutritious food available in the entire neighborhood to everybody, using this food bank as a catalyst and a foundation. So what we've done over the past year, we've developed a model. Neighborhoods across Toronto have churches that are at risk of closing down and being sold off. These are vital community assets. And we have another concurrent problem of food security in Toronto. Food is becoming more and more expensive and unaffordable, and that impacts us, everyone from all walks of life. So the idea is the food hub is spurring community gardens, farmers markets, more fresh food. It's taking champions and influencers in the neighborhood and giving them a platform to continue doing this work. So we ask ourselves, can we work together with partners from the community to save this church while creating a new model for food security that can be transported across the city and other neighborhoods? What really emerged from a year of work is an expansive vision for neighborhood food hubs, locally responsive, community-driven models that fuel the creation of community gardens, food sharing, cooking and preserving, fresh food markets. It's a supporter of entrepreneurs who want to start new food businesses that can use this kitchen and use this space. So what have we actually done over the past year? Well, we've recruited 15 partners from the community to join the Food Hub to help guide it and advise it. We've delivered over 30 food programs and activities to over 300 local attendees. We collaborated to host a night market, which raised over $3,000 that we used to start a fresh food market that occurs during the food bank. This provides incredibly affordable fresh vegetables for those that are getting mostly canned and frozen goods from that food bank. And it's all run by volunteers. Over the past 3 months, they've sold over 1,500 pounds of fresh vegetables, and this market sold out every single week and is now run by those volunteers. We gave the actual place a facelift as well. We've renovated the entire place. We've fixed up the kitchen, and all of this was done through donations and partnerships. So if we've learned anything over the past year of working in this space, we've learned that the vision of the Neighborhood Food Hub is about as profound as a library in every neighborhood. All the work that we've done has been through people who are grasping this vision and contributing their time, money, and resources to make these things happen. So we could never have gotten here if it wasn't for that passionate community. What we have in store for the next 6 months is to continue this work, but develop revenue-generating programs. For example, we'll be helping people who want to start a new business in a farmer's market or a fresh food market work in our kitchen for free, and then they can learn how to cook, get their certification, and go out and actually do it themselves. So it's really, to be an absolute cliche, we're replacing fish with fishing rods. How can we turn food banks in these churches across the city into community food hubs that empower people to take control of their own food system? We have 2 huge problems right now, which is climate and instability in our food system is making food more expensive every single year. We need to develop a way for people to take control of their food system themselves and work together and build communities around that. It's really been a year of victories and failures, dead ends and awesome innovations, but what's come around is this new concept for a neighborhood food hub that people are earnestly believing in. And at the end of the 6 months, we believe we'll have a model that can be export to neighborhoods and wards across the city. We all have churches that are at risk, our community buildings at risk, and we all have people in our neighborhoods that are hungry. Can we take these 2 problems and have them work together? And that's what we're doing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation, sir. Are there any questions for Mr. Taylor? Okay, seeing none. Deirdre Burke was the Leslieville Farmers Market. Hello, thank you, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, Economic and Community Development Committee. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's lunch, so I'll keep this really nice and short. My name is Deirdre Burek, and I am the Executive Director of the Leslieville Farmers Market, and I'll be speaking on behalf of the market. The Leslieville Farmers Market began in 2011 as a small little market, and now we are one of the largest markets in the city. We have over 40,000 visitors a year, and we host more than 150 vendors in this past year. The market is more than just its numbers. We also provide a platform for new food businesses in the city, a learning and activity space for children, as well as providing a space to enjoy the emerging arts and culture that this city has to offer. This past year, the Leslieville Farmers Market had the pleasure of partnering with the Neighbourhood Food Hub in what we consider a mutually beneficial collaboration of two community organizations making positive changes on a neighborhood level. Together, we have made connections and relationships with local groups we otherwise would not have without each other, and we furthering our impact in our community. For example, as a means to reduce food waste, we've had a few farmers donate excess food from the market to the Neighbourhood Food Hub to use in our food accessibility workshops put on by the Leslieville Farmers Market at the Food Hub. These workshops were known as Growing Together and Eating Together, and they were 8-week workshops, complementary programs for the community to learn how to grow produce in their backyards, as well as in community gardens and balconies, and learn how to prepare those dishes influenced by what we grew. And we later used to eat together as one big group at a table. Together, we also raised $6,000 at our annual night market fundraiser, as Daniel mentioned, $3,000 of which went to the Leslieville Farmers Market children's activities and programs, while the remaining $3,000 went to the Neighbourhood Food Hub food accessibility programming. Our partnership has brought together many local services with local service providers. I'm excited for the potential of many other farmers markets across the GTA to experience a part of a replicable food hub model like this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions for Mr. Burke? Okay, seeing none, thank you. On the item, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Members, we are now moving to the next item, which is EC 11.4, Investment, Employment, and Training as part of the Regent Park Social Development Plan. The first speaker is Miguel Villa Velarde, Regent Park Neighborhood Association. Mr. Villa, you are no stranger to this committee, so you are aware as to what takes place. Let me know when you have plugged yourself in or are ready to go, sir. And the next person up after you, Mr. Villa, is Ishmael Afra. And then after Mr. Afra, we have Waleed Kogali, and then Janella Evangelista. Thank you. Are you ready, sir?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address. In 2020, the province and the federal government have invested $1 billion in Regent Park alone in the last 10 years. So this number, 582 employment opportunities created, is very low compared to the investment on the buildings. We have a social development plan that is part of the budget, and we just found out today that it's mentioned in the budget, but it has not included in the budget process. So we are very disappointed by that decision by the SDFA. We hope that they will reconsider this decision so that we move forward with our SDP plan for Regent Park. Aside from that, the community of Regent Park has been very active. In that regard, we have been in touch with Toronto Community Housing and the Regent Park Neighborhood Association because we are a very active community. We understand that we are selecting a developer for phases 4 and 5. So we are not happy with the results of these 582 jobs created in the last 10 years. See, note that we have a poverty reduction strategy that was funded by the city in the year 2015, created by former Councillor Pam McConnell. Unfortunately, the numbers are very depressing. We only have created 55 jobs according to this report on page number 5. So the community has reached out to the Community Benefits Network, who are helping us to develop the first ever community benefits agreement with Toronto Community Housing. I'm glad to see staff from community housing present today, because we want to remind them that we are waiting for them to know if we have accepted our community priorities report. We want to know if they are really serious to understand how important it is to create meaningful jobs in the community, because, as you are aware, on July the 4th, we lost a member of the community here. On January the 4th, we have a vigil, and we remember that how disappointing it is that we don't have jobs for our members of our community. Ahmed Jahad could be alive today, and we have more job opportunities that are meaningful and direct to help them. So we continue investing in, we want to request to continue investing in schools in our community and not for police. That is the message always from the community. But I don't know, for one reason or another, the city seems not to understand this problem, that violence is related to poverty. Poverty in our community is 40%. So regardless of what we are promising by this SDFA, our community believes that a community benefits agreement signed with Toronto Community Housing and the future developer of phases 4 and 5 can be meaningful to create jobs that are traditionally impossible for people who have mental illnesses. So in that regards, I want to replay, if it's possible. I need help because I want to post a video that is available. Sorry. I'm having a problem with my computer today. I'm very sorry, but the invitation was to ask Mayor Tory to come to our community meetings so we can explain to him what is behind our community benefits agreement that will help residents of Regent Park to achieve meaningful work, employment, and not to miss another member of our community due to gun violence. And we have to invest in our communities, not in policing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Avila. Our next speaker is Ishmael Afar. Good afternoon, sir, and welcome. You have 5 minutes. Let me know when you're ready. We'll start your time.
Thank you, councillors. I wanted to start out by first talking about the goal of this committee. The goal of this committee as it stands says the Economic and Community Development Committee's primary focus is social cohesion and the economy, with a mandate to monitor and make recommendations on strengthening communities, neighborhoods, and the economy. You don't get a lot of opportunities to strategically think about where to meet out your goals. And the best way to fulfill your goals is to match it with your resources that you're thinking about. So interestingly, we are in a budget cycle, and this is the opportunity where the goals of the committees and the goals of the city overall meet with the resources that they're willing to allocate. As Miguel had showcased, we are an active community. This active community is not by accident. It's actually with the investments that you've already done beforehand. In your TSN 2020 strategy, you've outlined 3 main ideas, which is to activate people, to activate resources, and to activate neighborhood-friendly policies. That strategy has been the heart of the work that's been happening in Regent Park through the stakeholders table, which is one of the neighborhood planning tables that come off of that strategy. Regent Park has been activated. We are working on important projects in the neighborhood that relate to policy, and as many of you know, one of the great achievements of this committee and last year was the pilot for with Parks and Rec for the Learn to Swim program. Right now, we are working with this committee and SDFA for a longer, more strategical ask, which is to resource the social development plan of Regent Park. The original social development had 75 recommendations, but there was no resource implications for those recommendations. Much of those recommendations were left to service providers to think about how they will implement. However, with the new social development plan, what was put into it was strategical thinking, structure, governance, a strong governance structure, and a funding aspect. That funding aspect made its way to this committee, and it was hoped that through conversations in this committee, it could be resourced in the 2020 budget. Much of that work would be social development and social cohesion does not happen by accident. It has to be worked, it has to be coordinated, and it has to be backed up and supported by all the stakeholders. We have, as Miguel talked about, we are working with Toronto Community Housing to secure community benefits agreement for the next development. If you look at the resources that has went through Regent Park the last year, I have here on record that about $864,000 came from Toronto Community Housing, with direct investment from the developer of $2 million and indirect investment of $5 million. If you look at the total investment that went to revitalization is about $8 million. But in comparison, if you look at this number on its own, it seems quite impressive. However, nothing, as my history teacher told me, it all depends. It all depends on context. The context we're talking about is $1 billion redevelopment. Now, when the revitalization was created, it was said that it stood on two legs. The first one was physical development. The second one was a social development. Now, if you've spent about $1 billion on physical development and you've spent this much on social development, this would be about a 0.008%. Now, how do you suppose a community is revitalized if one of its legs, it's only at a 0.8%? So we have tough decisions to make. I don't envy your position because you do have to consider city priorities across the board. However, Regent Park is a crucial element to that vision because a lot of investments is going through it, and you do want to see at the end of the road a fully realized revitalization, and that means that you do really have to support and put resources and activate those resources for Regent Park. As Miguel had said, the item is under budget committee, and I do understand there's a whole budget process, but I do hope that your goals do match how you resource. In terms of community benefits, this is some other work that we are doing with Toronto Community Housing, and I do see in the report that you refer to a community benefit liaison will be done, and I do hope that Toronto Community Housing has worked with us in good faith, and we're hoping that good faith collaboration happens, and that at the end of the results, we do have a better phase.
Thank you very much, sir. It's 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Walid Kogali. Oh, sorry, question? Okay, Councillor Carroll has a question of you, sir. Go ahead, sorry.
So you've not only gone through this report, but you've been tracking it as part of the community work you're doing all along. So we were having this conversation offline just yesterday, and we started talking about it in the greater context of how we do social development plans and in particular youth, and then started relating it to this report. Part of the problem, part of the reason you see the much smaller amount going into the investment is we start out with a plan, but it's catch as catch can because a lot of it depends on, and then we'll ask the federal government to help us with this piece, and then we'll ask the provincial government to help us with this piece. Do you think we'd be better off if while we love those partners, there should be a base amount that we're willing to spend just ourselves with city dollars so that in the years where they're not helping out, politically or economically for whatever reason, there's still a steady flow going into that community from city funds. Is that part of it? Some of the programs we go in and it talks about them indirect investments, program, not system, but program, which means beginning and a middle and then an end. Should we have more system dollars going in there from the city?
Many of these investments are hard to track, and what we need is a very much coordinated piece. And I think a great question was asked by our councillor, which she asked and said, who's responsible for social development? If you put it, and the answer that was given was SDFA. SDFA is responsible for that, and what that means is that the city council is responsible for that. And a base budget for social development is necessary. It is great to facilitate conversations with other levels of government to double the impact, but a clarity around leadership has to come from a city council, and you have to invest in what you strategized, right? You've created the strategies, you've created the plans, and you have to match that with the resources you have.
Right, but sometimes you can't match because they just sort of disappear for a couple of years. Our investment should continue.
Yes, and what
Essentially, that's what you're saying.
yes, and what we're asking for is not an exuberant amount of money. What we're asking for is a coordinator who will facilitate that role, because the old SDP did not have a coordinator. It was it was trying to, what do you call it, all the partners in the neighborhood, it was trying to get 9 cats into the same table, right? And without a coordinator, that's impossible. And a base budget for the action plans is required, and I think given the level of investments that is being directed in the neighborhood, we have to get the city as a leader in it as well.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Our next speaker is Waleed Kogali. Mr. Kogali? Let me know when you're ready, sir. I'll start your time.
Okay, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Waleed Kogali. I'm with the Regent Park Community Benefits Coalition. I'm here to support not just the request that was made by the previous speakers, Ishmael and Miguel, but also to call our City Council to action by working with all levels of government when it comes to investment in Regent Park, and specifically the housing crisis. So I'm going to start off with a couple of comments as context, and then I'll probably end up with my request. The context is, like my colleague said earlier, the revitalization Regent Park is a $1.1 billion investment by all levels of government. And my friend Miguel pointed to the amounts of jobs that were created, about 3 dozens, which is ludicrous, and actually not the return of investment that the residents of Regent Park were made to believe. And what I think we have is an opportunity for phase 4 and 5 to correct the mistakes that were made. And one of the most important ways to do so is by committing to a community benefits framework that specifically has hard targets for local employment, specifically has specific targets when it comes to housing and a pathway to home ownership. Because what we don't want Regent Park to be a neighborhood of just millionaires. If you don't live in Toronto community housing, and if you're not paying rent, you basically are a millionaire. And what we hope is our city will show leadership by working with other levels of government to make sure that those investments are made. Now, I am happy to let you folks know that the residents of Regent Park have been very engaged through the community benefits effort. We had hundreds of people show up to a community meeting where they prioritized what they would like to see when it comes to investment. And that is how development should start. It should start from communities. It should start from residents. It shouldn't start from developers with the grand plans for our community, which is sometimes out of touch when it comes to the realities of folks living in our community. The other point that I'd like to make is that we have met with representatives from the provincial government, and we've met with the Office of Bill Morneau just as yesterday. And what we have realized is there is support for the investments that we're looking for. But what is lacking is the leadership, the coordination, by making sure that all those representatives from all levels meet with folks from our community to speak to how they will fund the priorities identified by the community through a very engaging process that actually involved those that are sometimes ignored when it comes to consultations. So my ask is a simple ask, is we would like not just our city councilor, but also the mayor's office and this council to take a leadership role in making sure that the $1.1 billion investment that's going to Regent Park is well suited to support residents that now are finding it almost impossible to live in this city. Lastly, I want to thank the staff at the City of Toronto for being very accessible and passing on information, to my colleagues and other folks who are trying to make sure that the community benefits framework that was passed by the City of Toronto is actually applied in capital projects and development across the city. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope we will see more investments when it comes to the priorities identified by the residents of Regent Park. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, sir. Let me just check and see if there are any questions for you, sir. Are there any questions for Mr. Kigali? Okay, seeing none. Okay, questions of staff? Is there a question of staff? Any questions of staff? Okay, seeing none. Sorry, Councillor? Councillor Wong Tam?
I thought there was one more speaker.
She's left.
Okay, thank you very much. So through you, Mr. Chair, and the question to staff, with respect to the tracking of job creation as an outcome of the social development investments in Regent Park, what type of tools were available in 2007 when this process began, and what is available today? What are your tracking mechanisms?
Anyone?
My clock is running.
So's mine.
Through the chair. The process of tracking jobs was a manual process. TESS assumed some responsibility for the tracking of jobs. I wouldn't necessarily term it job creation, but jobs as a result of revitalization. The TESS role is really a workforce development role, matching employers' needs with the jobs, with these skills that clients have, and matching those two and tracking the jobs that result. So that is what has been tracked. We could only track, of course, those jobs that were registered with TESS. There were probably jobs outside created by TCH or the developer that were not registered with TESS. TESS's role is to focus on the OW client, so largely the tracking related to that. One of the things that TESS did in 2016 when we opened the news center at Regent Park was to make sure that we had a partnership with Employment Ontario. That's why we're co-located with Dixon Hall at Regent Park. So because they're focusing on the non-OW client.
Thank you. I think my question was more directed at SDFA because I've been, in my conversations with Chris Brillinger before his departure, I asked him who owned the social development plan, and he said it was SDFA. So my question is really for SDFA. If you own the social development plan, what mechanisms are available in tracking the job creation today versus what was available in 2007 when the process began?
Through the chair, we've got more and better tools now than we had when the social development plan was created in 2007. We are working through our community benefits framework work to create those vehicles to be able to track the kind of jobs, who gets those jobs, and the long-term, the longevity of those jobs. So that is a work in progress that we hope to have up and running by Q2 2020.
And so with respect to moving forward, I see that the report, you sort of went back in time to try to figure out what happened so you can bring forward a report to show us today in 2020 numbers, which is always very difficult when you have to go back and figure out where did all the data go. With respect to moving forward, the data collection and how you manage the information and where the actual physical dollars of investments going to community and what the outcome is, are you confident that you will have better tools in terms of tracking, monitoring, and reporting to ensure greater accountability and transparency?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor. We are being called upon from a variety of communities to be able to track community benefits as they present themselves, whether it's within public projects or within private projects. We are gaining more and more experience through the Rexdale Casino work that is ongoing, and we're learning some of the problems, issues, and fixes, solutions around tracking jobs.
Okay, I may have time for just one final question. With respect to the learning of phases 1 and 3, I think revitalization was fairly new to TCHC in terms of large campus revitalization. The learnings that have taken place between 1 and 3 and what is going to hopefully course correct itself as we move forward to 4 and 5, what are some of the big takeaways that you will have to do to make sure the SDFA truly owns as well as champions the social development plan moving forward?
Through the chair, we will need to work with both the community, with TCHC, with TESS, and with the developer as we move forward into the next phases of Regent Park.
Thank you. Okay. Any more questions of staff? Okay, seeing none. To speak, Councillor Wong-Tam, did you wish to speak?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And I want to thank staff for bringing this report forward. Mr. Chair, I recognize that, you know, a lot of the reasons why we're actually heading in this direction now in terms of bringing this type of dialogue back into this particular standing committee has a lot to do with a number of the member motions that I actually moved in 2019 to say, let's bring it all into the light of in this room. Let's invite the community in for a dialogue, and let's make sure that everything that we do in Regent Park is actually going to be number one, studied, but also in terms of making quick pivots if we need to. If things that we didn't do well, we need to do better. The revitalization to Regent Park began well before I became a local councillor. I've been here for 1 year as the councillor for Regent Park, but I do recognize that there's been tremendous investments of time, energy, and political power that has gone into making Regent Park, stand up and be super proud of who they are. Some of that work. Some of that credit belongs to Councillor McConnell. Some of it belongs to definitely a lot to the community. But I actually think that what I've seen over the past year, Mr. Chair, is that the city has not really taken on the proactive role of championing social development. And that has been, in my observation, probably one of the biggest pieces that's missing as I speak to neighborhoods and as I speak to the community members of what can the city do now as we're heading into the final phases of 4 and 5 to make sure that we don't leave people behind unintentionally. And what they've said to me is that they're really proud of the new facilities. There's no doubt about it. We've got some fantastic new facilities, but they do feel that the economic opportunities have not been shared with the community as broadly as it could have been. And when I spoke to Chris Berlinger before his departure, who owns the social development plan? So that basically, who owns the investments in the people? Whose job is it to make sure that people are invested in? And I asked him, is it TCHC? Is it the developer? Is it the city? And he didn't blink. He didn't bat an eyelash. He said, it's the city. So now what we need to do is really own it. And I say we own it by making sure we fund it, and we need to make sure we put those investments in an intentional way where we document it, and moving forward we can also benchmark the progress. The number of jobs that have been recorded as sort of created either tangentially or intangentially is 582 over this many years. I don't think it's a great performance, and perhaps there have been jobs that are created that were not captured, but certainly if we didn't capture them, then you're not going to get the credit. So we've got to do a better job of capturing that. And at the end of the day, if we don't necessarily capture the information that we need to be able to go back and say, this is what we've invested, this has been the outcome, then why would anybody want to do revitalization again? And because Regent Park was the first one out of the gate, then we better get it right, because Alexander Park is next. We've got Lawrence Heights coming up, and I know that it would make a lot of difference for those communities to know that they're not just getting shiny new buildings, but they're actually getting investments in the people and the families. And the shootings and the violence and the poverty that we've seen in Regent will hopefully at some point in time be, a reflection of the past and not repeating itself as the future, because certainly for the kids of Regent, they're looking for something better from us. Which brings me to the point of the budget. The social development plan, Mr. Chair, I'm sad to say, was not included in the 2020 budget. So all this talk about investments in Regent Park means that my community has to come back out again and ask for the support, which they will do. We're organizing them. They'll come out to the budget process. But after I was told that the city council, city councilors, the city owns the SDP, the social development plan, wouldn't it be just the right thing to do is just to put it right in the budget, as opposed to having me stand up on the floor of council, work the entire floor to make sure it gets funded. And so that's what we need to do. Everybody knows that. We're laying it down on the ground for the community. They need to know this is what's at stake for them. And I'm hoping that the budget committee, the mayor, the staff, and yourselves here will be able to support that, because that's the one missing piece from the revitalization success story. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I bring the matter into committee. Councillor Carroll, speak.
Yeah, I wanted to underscore it, because if we can't actually build it in and get it right in Regent Park, then there are really dire reasons to be concerned about that, because beyond really the big three that Councillor Wong Tam just mentioned, Alexandra Park and Lawrence Heights, I sort of think of those as all the big three. The revitalization and the two projects in my ward and the next wave that I know is coming, the real challenge is when we're going to get into suburban revitalizations where there are only 150 or less or fewer units to begin with in a complex that might be being revitalized. There aren't the retail grade opportunities in some of those projects, which means zero social development beyond the superficial, a few bursaries from the developer, and maybe a couple of success stories coming out of the animators. And then you're done. Unless we see more energy in keeping the commitment in Regent Park, I don't see the point in making any commitment in the smaller revitalizations that are to come. As it is, I'm struggling to find what can I add to the value proposition now that we give to tenants in the ones that I've done. We're going to disrupt your lives. You're going to pull your kids out of school and out of your home for a couple of years. You're going to come back, and you're going to have a newer unit with smaller square footage and living spaces, by the way, and not much else. Because if we can't do social development when you have the economy of scope you get from doing one of the big three, then you're really getting zero in the others that have proceeded and are to proceed in the next wave. I understand the board to be working on. So that's why unlikely councillors who are nowhere near Regent Park are going to be highly invested in making sure that, as usual, it's one of those salmon fights for survival every spring motions. When Councillor Wong Tam moves that, that's why we support it. Because if it doesn't have a future of success, then we're not going to get any of it in any of the other projects to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Cressy to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have an amendment or a motion that I'm moving on behalf of Councillor Wong Tam, if that can be placed on the screen. As the local councillor has said it all, I will just reiterate that revitalizations, and Councillor Carroll just spoke about the so-called big three, are about people. They're not just about buildings, and the social development plans are central to that. And so I will simply say with Alexandra Park, which is in my community, where we have a social development plan as well, SDFA, TCHC, TESS, the local community have been at the table in the development of that. And it will be coming soon to this committee in terms of the next steps. And we have learned a tremendous amount from Regent Park in the development of that in terms of paving the way. And just as we're learning lessons from Regent, I'm looking forward to having the conversation at this committee table around Alexandra Park, and I want to thank staff for their hard work alongside us in the development of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. I have a motion, and I'm going to speak. This was asked of me to move on behalf of Councillor Fletcher, and Councillor Fletcher has been very exercised in her energy in wanting to ensure that we had a better understanding in terms of what has transpired in Regent Park and wanting to know the number of jobs. I think all of us are surprised with respect to the number of jobs that's contained in the report itself. I know the community has expressed certainly, I believe, some surprise, as well as the sort of magnitude of the resources that were being invested in the community and sort of the outcome. The input doesn't really reflect what I would say would be been a outcome that we can all be very proud of and so on. Yeah, a lot of good things have happened, but a lot of other things have happened as well. A lot of people who left Regent Park never came back, never had the opportunity to come back, and people who did come back didn't really get the benefits that they were told they were going to get, that I heard that was said in council in that period when we were dealing with this. And in fact, one of the things that happened as a result of the direct consequences of people moving from Regent Park, we moved people who were at conflicts with other people into areas where all of a sudden they were there day in, day out. So what happened? A lot of people got killed. And we don't take any responsibility for that. I'm not even sure how many people realize that. Because when you basically explained to them what was going on, they were all surprised and so on. Oftentimes we actually have, well, we're well-intended, but sometimes the consequences of our well-intention is such that it's impacting us in a negative way. So we need to make sure that this is done properly and so on. You know, I applaud the work that's being done by Social Development Finance, TESS, and all the work that's being done. I think what we're saying here is that we can do a better job, and I think we all agree that that is the case, and this is hopefully the intent. We are all, as members of council, have areas that we want to revitalize. Some of it is in the strict sense of building form. Some of it is just in terms of more parks, more playground equipment, better streets, better sidewalks, and so on. I too have one of these areas in my community. It's Antrim, Glamorgan. We're working on it. We've chosen a different approach, because when I did go to staff and I said, well, look, we'd like to have a plan to help the community, they said, well, we've got all these other plans and your community is not even going to be on the radar for the next many, many, many years. So we had to revisit that. So we went to the community and we said, hey, we need you to develop a community-led plan that we're going to provide some assistance and so on and so forth. And if we have to get the resources, and we have to go and pull other talent and sort of physical resources from elsewhere. We're going to have to do it, because we just can't allow this community just to feel that they are being left behind. And I think this is part of it, right? And it's of great concern to all of us. So we're working in my office with the community, with a community-led initiative. I had some discussion with the mayor about this and so on, and about what the community wanted. So we went out with a whole team of people. And yes, we did get help from Social Development Finance and whatever, because we're going to take the help wherever we can get it. But what is actually different for us is that it's being led by community leaders. Because the notion that, as Bob Marley has said often, he who feels it the most knows it the best. And I think this is something that we have to listen to. So we have to work with the local community and so on. So we're doing that, and we need to do more. And the report is before us, and so we are sending it off to, obviously, Toronto Community Housing, and we're asking for another report to come forward, and this matter will be addressed. And of course, as we go forward, we want to make sure that we're able to better track who's actually benefiting and how are they benefiting, what's the impact and so on, the results that we want to attain, and to understand the measurements, and because the measurements will help us in terms of realizing whether or not we're successful or not. So there are two motions on the screen. The first one is the motion that's been moved by Councillor Cressy on behalf of Councillor Wong Tam. So all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The second motion is the motion that I'm moving for Councillor Fletcher. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, that's the item. I'm going to, just before we reopen item number 8, and Councillor Carroll, we're going to do your last item, which is yes, exactly. I just want to take a moment to recognize Miss Patricia Walcott. This is her last meeting in her capacity and position as the General Manager of TESS, Toronto Employment and Social Services. She has been here for 6 years, but it's been 6 impactful years. I recall being on the panel when we hired you as myself, Joe Panichetti, and Brenda Pattison. And you came from the federal government, and you came with a vast array of experience. And your predecessor had been here for 30-plus years, and she was absolutely amazing. And we had a bit of a void. We needed to find someone who could hit the ground running and to lead the team, and then to also ensure that leadership would ensure that there's a next group of young leaders coming through the system, so the training and development and so on and so forth. And we tasked you with that responsibility, and I can say, Ms. Walcott, based on what I've seen, because I was there at the start and I'm now here at the end, you have exceeded my expectation and all of our expectations. I have spoken with your team, I've spoken with the DCM, I've spoken with everybody who's connected with you. I've not had anything but a sense of excellence in terms of the response that we've gotten about your contribution, the work you've done. We've had numerous meetings over the years, sitting down, talking about the goals and responsibilities and so on, and how to connect, how to make the connections. You and I have met with numerous businesses. We've actually helped so many people in terms of your group, your division, and so on, and obviously the members of council. All of your leadership team members have had nothing but amazing things to say about what you have done in terms of the transformation and the advancement of this city department. You have helped thousands and thousands of people through your leadership and your staff direction and your amazing team. And so for that, I want to say thank you from all of us from this committee and your contribution. And I know that this is not the end. I'm sure that council will recognize you as well. But I wanted just to take a moment as we interlude here, just to thank you so much for what you have done. So many people have benefited from your leadership who will never know you, who would never meet you. But that was not really your criteria for wanting to help. It was not about people knowing who you are, knowing what you were doing. Just you wanted them to ensure that they felt the impact of your leadership and your team helping them. We've transformed so much. We've spent a lot of time together. We've traveled to varying places right across the city, met some of the department, met the people, whether or not we were actually in Dixon Road, helping the Somali community directly in the leadership of the mayor with jobs there, whether or not we were elsewhere across the city in cold winter days, having a press conference on the outside, the mayor and I think that was all the councillors there, but we were all there trying to create impact and the people who benefited that. So for that, Ms. Walcott, I wanted on behalf of this committee to thank you so much for your great contribution to the residents of this city, and some of them who are no longer residents, but because of what you did, you helped them and they've advanced themselves and their families have advanced themselves and so on. So from us to you, we wish you great travels, great relaxation, great time on the beach with your family and in your retirement and so on. So we greatly appreciate all that you've done to help us as a city to advance the opportunity and to help people to really focus on pride and dignity. And I use the dignity piece because when we introduced the card system to help people on social services and so on, you recall we were talking and I said, well, this is not like a credit card, it's a dignity card. The whole idea behind that was how we help people, because we basically remove that stigma in terms of people going in with those checks and people looking at them in a different way and feeling that they didn't deserve to be respected in the manner that they should be and so on. And we transformed that. And so that effort through your team and so on, you've transformed people's lives. And at the end of the day, the footprint that you've left on this city is so much larger than many would realize. So thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you, Ms. Welker. I know you'll have lots to say at council, so we'll wait till then. So members of council, I wanted to ask that if we could reopen Item EC 11.8, there's a motion basically to refer the matter to the film office. That's the mayor's travel to Los Angeles. I think Councillor Fletcher, myself, and the mayor were there. So the mayor's report on to the Film and Television Board. So move to reopen. All those in favor? The item, if we can just put the motion on the screen and maybe just have members read this. And if there's no questions and no one wishes to speak, we can just basically advance this. It's actually a forwarding. It's just forwarding. Okay? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. No, it's a forward. It is. And so now we're left with EC. Councillor, we one more question. EC 11.9. Councillor Carroll, the Toronto Economic Bulletin.
Well, it may be my question can just be sort of superficially answered, and we can look at it in our next meeting, because I've already talked to Mr. Williams offline. My question that I wanted to ask today is the big dip in building permits issued. So I'm worried about, if when that persists, we have a big ripple effect in the local economy. Should we be worried, or should we sort of crack this open next month?
So this statistic of any statistic we track is the most herky-jerky that we have. Goes up and down depending upon the November data that's reported here is the lowest in the last 2 years. It was also very low, by the way, in the rest of the 905. We've seen this before in terms of low numbers followed by big months. I don't think we can answer this, whether this is a trend for at least a couple more months, to see what it's like through December and through January reporting. Yeah. And then we can come back to it. The other comment I'd like to make is we're so extended in our construction. If things slow down for a little bit, it's not going to hurt because we've got such a backlog. It's if it slows down for a long time, this is very much a leading indicator. Many of these building permits don't get used for months and maybe even years. But we'll keep a close eye on it and come back to committee if we see a trend developing.
So just to follow up, and I'm content to wait a couple of months, but if we are and if we're tracking it, if we could also take a look at how much of that is economically driven or even market driven, which is fine if the supply is there in new units and that's why they're waiting to pick up, fine. But if we could also look at, have we ended up with a big legislative problem here where, Bill 108 was supposed to drive more development, and in fact, it's created a huge appeal backlog all over the place in secondary plans and individual approvals. How much of that is a feature here, and how much of it is market and economy?
Yeah, I mean, to that, this may well be just a pause while everybody tries to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. So we can just
and once they figure it out, then they go ahead. I mean, all the other indicators are very strong. So
yeah,
I'm not worried that this is the canary in the coal mine, but I think we have to watch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Did you wish to speak or just move the receipt?
No, I think I sort of telegraphed
So the motion here is to receive the item report to council. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Cressy. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, and thank you to the clerks. Thank you.